Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to day 2 of the Sustainability Summit 2022. We had awesome engagements yesterday, and if you weren't tuned in, we still got you covered because the link is available on YouTube. Once again, please don't forget to hashtag SUSWeek 2022 and to also feel free to visit our 3D online exhibition as you do stand a lot of prizes to win. Just to recap on some of the conversations and the panel discussions that we had yesterday, we kickstarted the day with the energy seminar. Once again, before that, we had Mr. Janess from SAP, who just gave us a contextual understanding of what is the energy crisis currently and how can we ensure that policies and current practices can ensure accessibility and efficacy for some of the platforms that we have in the country and also globally. Also, we looked at how do we develop alternative supplies of renewable energy to ensure efficient and effective access, precisely looking at nuclear energy, hydrogen energy as well. And of course, we discussed load shedding, our current crisis. We're not too sure what stage you're on today, but we've got you covered. Don't worry about that. And how do we build a technical capacity around that? We had Mr. Lipschitz there, who told us that load shedding has costed us 10 billion rand per day. This is how crucial and how detrimental the lack of energy supply is causing a lot of systems and businesses in the country. How do we resolve those issues? And we had a couple of our panelists there, Mr. Nichols and also Mr. Pratt, talking about creating more solar systems, having solar access, PV plus storage as well. Also, we looked at how do we decarbonize the economy. It's not just about creating a nuclear or green hydrogen supply when it comes to energy, but how do we build more coal power stations? Because electricity costs 3 times more. And one of the other things for me that stood out is how do we then look at the market, observe the market, create a suitable model for the market, and once again, ensuring that scalability takes place. We then had a panel discussion on gender equality, that supporting women is not just about effective policy and practice and ensuring equality in the workspace, but it's also creating a feasible environment for them to thrive, for them to feel safe in their contribution and in their creativity in the workspace. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, today it's day 2 and we have a packed program once again. We look forward for you to engage on, or rather with us on our online platforms. We are receiving your questions. We are welcoming your insights and we will ensure that all the speakers have access to that. Just a recap on today or the day that is about to follow. We're speaking about infrastructure for smart cities. What is infrastructure? We need to provide context to infrastructural development to ensure, is it bankable? Is it sustainable? And can it be functional for the developmental agenda that we have? And also, we're going to be speaking about food security, the value chains around agriculture, around the agribusiness, as well as the ocean economy. And later on, we probably will be speaking about sustainability and ensuring that stakeholders such as young people, stakeholders such as different institutions, community projects are at the core of these conversations. Right after this, we'll be kickstarting the day with infrastructure development. Stay tuned.
The evidence is clear. Organizations with more women in senior positions outperform those with less inclusive C-suites. Yet women remain underrepresented in all levels of management. To bridge this gap, the UN Global Compact launched Target Gender Equality, an accelerator program that helps our participating companies set and meet ambitious corporate targets for women's representation and leadership in business. Companies that commit to the accelerator program are not only equipped with the latest data and research, but they also then join a growing network of partners who are working collectively to tackle the barriers to closing the gender gap from the C-suite through to the supply chain and into the communities that these companies serve. Now let's hear from some of the participating companies directly.
It has been 1 year since our participation in Target Gender Equality. The initiative has been helpful to us. We have understood the importance of not just setting overall targets, but interim targets as well. We have seen the number of female employees in management level has increased. We are already working on how to improve facilities for ensuring better, comfortable and safe work environment. We are even conducting monthly meetings discussing the progress of Target Gender Equality. We would highly recommend other companies to join the Target Gender Equality program.
As a UN Global Compact participant, this program allows us to accelerate our practices of the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles. We benefit from the action planning guides, workshops and real-world examples provided by the program, which helped us creating a dedicated roadmap for our contribution to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
One thing we have learned is that regardless of how big or small your company is, or how many
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned into a Sustainability Summit 2022. Please don't forget to hashtag SUSWeek 2022. And also, we are now about to engage on the panel discussion around infrastructure for smart cities. What do we really mean about infrastructure? And even when we talk about smart cities, it's a term that we are throwing around, but we're about to add some meat to the bones here. So please do add your comments. Add your questions. We'll be more than happy to assist in answering. When we look at sustainable social economic growth, we know that that could be achieved through infrastructure investment. And joining me this morning to have this discussion, we have Mr. Chris Campbell, who is the CEO for Consulting Engineers South Africa. We have Mr. Charles Nduku, who will be joining us shortly, who is the president of the South African Council for Architectural Profession. We also have Mr. Frans Dekker, who is the Managing Director for the South African Institute of Architectural Technologies, NPC. We also do have Mr. Bongani Dladla, who is the CEO of Construction Industrial Development Board. And we also have, last but not least, Dr. Patrick Nzime, who is acting head at Bankable Cities, Metros and Water Boards under DBSA. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Tabang, and good morning to everyone. Allow me to introduce myself. As Tabang rightfully pointed out, my name is Chris Campbell. I'm the CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa. And certainly being an organization with a member base of over 600 consulting engineering companies across the country, and having exposure to member associations across the continent and globally, because we are affiliated to both a regional body as well as the global body for consulting engineers. We are no strangers to what smart cities should be, what they can be, and of course, back home, being able to then take stock of where we are in the scheme of things. When we compare ourselves, for example, to our neighboring countries, Kenya, maybe significantly, and likely places like Nigeria, Lagos, and then even as far afield as, for example, let's just take Geneva, because that's where our international organization is headquartered. But of course, we've got to be real to where each of us are in the scheme of things in terms of development of our economies and some of the legacy setbacks and catch-ups and all of the unfortunate experiences that we might have had that have indeed set us back in terms of our aspirations. So, I certainly can go into a lot of the technical aspects, but I think that would be preempting the conversations. Thank you, Tabang, for that.
Thank you very much for the support. We definitely need the technical aspects, Mr. Campbell. So please do keep that in mind in terms of engagement. Can we have Mr. Frans Dekker?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm being the managing director at the moment of the South African Institute for Architectural Technologists. And if you look at most of the type of buildings that are actually constructed in cities and towns will be in the residential sector. And I believe that you have to look at your residential sector first, because that will pave the way forward for smart cities to actually to do what they are supposed to do. Without the buy-in from the residential sector, and therefore as the grassroots level, basically that of the building owner, the homeowner, that is where I think the whole thing needs to start. It is good that big companies, etc., comply and make sure that they, when it comes to sustainability, do everything in their power to do so. But as I've said, the majority of buildings are in the residential sector, and that is where we also need to focus. And that is why we as an institute are also involved with the SABS technical committees. I am currently, or was the convener of the 2021 edition of SANSTEM 400 Part XA, energy using buildings. I'm also the current chairperson of technical committee. That's a subcommittee under a technical committee dealing with energy efficiency in South Africa. And I was just re-elected again for assessing, not assessing, but helping the legislation, which is basically minimum requirements to actually to achieve what we need to achieve. Thanks.
Thank you very much there, Mr. Dekker. A critical point that's worthy of engagement is the legislation around creating sustainable infrastructure. So we're looking forward to talking to you about that more. Can we please have Dr. Patrick Nsime?
Yes, thank you very much, Thabang, and greetings to all fellow panelists. So I'm from the Development Bank, the DBSA. And for us, social and economic infrastructure is quite critical. In our case, our key focus areas, as you might know, are water and sanitation, roads and transport, energy, ICT and health, and education. So the notion of smart city and smart infrastructure appeals to us mainly because if we get it right, then we will be in a position to assist our cities to deliver better and faster services. So the word smart, as you said, we need to be very blunt because it means many things to many people. And for us, we are starting to learn, and that's why 2 years ago, we contracted the World Bank as a leading technical advisor to execute a smart city pilot program on our behalf. They are looking at 4 cities or metros, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, eThekwini, and Johannesburg. And the whole idea is to, as Franz was saying, to look at smart city approaches and practices which can be utilized by these cities in the rollout of the CAPEX program. And hopefully at the end of the day, and at the end of the program, we will get a pipeline of projects or smart projects where we can get colleagues on the panel, obviously, with their technical expertise to assist us. But you said we need to look at the current reality, and the question I'm asking myself is, can we really be talking about the experiencing MNDKs? Some of them are on the brink of collapse. They are technically dysfunctional and financially insolvent. So that's a paradigm that we need to address, or maybe a balancing act. And I don't know how we're going to approach that because the stakes are quite high. At the moment, we're experiencing load shedding like never before. And the question is, are we ready? And at the end of the day, the people who are affected the most, it's not the smart city, it's not the infrastructure, because those are external factors. I believe we need to worry more about a customer. Smart city is about people and by people. And if we don't shift, for instance, we keep calling the members of the public ratepayers and taxpayers, we don't regard them as customers because customers deserve the best service. If you give the customer the best service, customers always reciprocate. And when customers reciprocate, they'll be willing to pay for the services. And if they are willing to pay for services, we should be able to improve the revenues of most of our cities. At the moment, that is not entirely the situation, and that is why if you were to do a dipstick in all our cities today and find out the happiness levels of our customers, you'll be shocked. So COVID has given us almost a new mandate to revisit the way we deal with customers. Their needs, we need to understand what they like. We need to understand what their preferences are in terms of how we need to serve them. Because customers don't care how much we know. All they want to know is how much do we care. And I think the smart city concept and smart infrastructure gives us the opportunity for us to look at smart processes, smart partnerships, smart leaderships, smart everything. But otherwise, I don't think we are ready yet. So that's my contribution for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much there, Dr. Nzime. We truly appreciate the context that you've given to what are we talking about in terms of smart. And I think it's such a simple word, but you've added a bit of flesh there, which we look forward to engaging further around that. Mr. Dladla, welcome, and over to you. Please unmute yourself. There we go.
I knew I was going to be the first to be reminded of virtual meeting etiquettes. Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues. And yes, we look forward to contributing to this. My name is, as indicated, Bongani Dladla, both a sustainability and a water engineer, currently leading the Construction Industry Development Board, which is a regulator and a developmental agent in the construction industry. So what our contribution towards building towards smarter cities is ensuring that there is the legislative and the regulatory framework to create the building blocks for smart cities. Smart cities do not start at using sensors. It starts off when you design your infrastructure. Is my network poor?
A little bit, but we've got you now. It just goes on and off, but you can continue.
Yes, thank you very much. As I was indicating, smart cities do not start at the perspective of using the data and actually using the sensors and all the technologies that comes with it. It starts at the inception of at design stage, at planning stage. Are we planning using the systems that will enable us to turn the data that will be collected at a later date to useful information? So it starts with also creating the frameworks, like your building information systems at the beginning of your planning of infrastructure projects, so that we don't go later on in trying to figure out what to do with the infrastructure and try to convert it into smarter cities. So there is a lot of benefits to smart cities, but it actually requires thinking far earlier on, not at the point of construction, but at the point of planning. And that's the contribution that our entity also can contribute towards that.
We're looking forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Dladla. We're looking forward to you answering the very question that you posed. Let's go back to Mr. Campbell just to kickstart the discussions. I think, you spoke about the relevance of our legacy setbacks. Yes. What are the legacy setbacks that you believe have affected our perspective of infrastructure development currently, and also what entails developing a smart city? I mean, you've used quite a number of case in points there in other countries. So maybe you can bring in the legacy aspect and the technical expertise or capacity that we need to actually move forward.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I have like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, because this can take me an hour. So I don't.
No, 3 minutes, Mr. Campbell, please.
3 minutes.
Please, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because it's a huge topic, and so I'll certainly try to respond in that space of time. So firstly, I think the realities that we face as a country, and over the past years post 94, we've done quite a bit in respect of trying to get water, sanitation to many more households, which should have been there in the first place. Surfaced many roads, etc., in many of what were our traditional townships in urban areas. You know, as far back, I guess, is 94. Was it 9? Yes, as far back as 1993, I recall being involved in a project where we had already then, with the then Soweto Town Council, been looking at and working on surfacing what were all gravel roads. And today, I guess we're a long way down that road in terms of the road surfacing. Unfortunately, with time and I guess maybe an overzealous approach to the capability and the capacity that would be needed to ensure that the correct people are in place with the appropriate skills and duty of care, would make sure that this infrastructure remained functional so that you could build on to that into the future. Where we are at this point in time, and I think one of our colleagues alluded to it, I think it was Patrick, that a lot of that has regressed. So whereas we should have been able to use that as a springboard, water and sanitation systems in many areas where they were functional are not functional. And these unfortunately are a lack of maintenance over time, not having the requisite and appropriate people deployed into the municipalities to make sure that service delivery remains at the level that we could convert more of our towns into these smart cities. Right now, Johannesburg, for example, would be nowhere near being able to be categorized and the work that it would take to undo a lot of the deterioration. I am aware that the city of Joburg is likely looking at a project on the renewal and in its entirety of the city of Joburg. It's going to be quite a task. And why am I saying that is that if we just take transport as one aspect of it, a smart city should have been able to provide people, communities that commute in and out of and around Johannesburg with various options around public transport, where the public transport should be affordable, reliable, safe, functional, and integrated, and formal as well. And I think the elephant in the room there is the continued prevalence of an informal taxi system, not being integrated into a system where you could have buses, taxis, let's not even lament what has happened to Metro Rail and their system, which I think was completely allowed to be cannibalized by thieves and scoundrels through the scrap metal industry. So that rail system is just not serving the communities, and everybody is now reliant from an affordability and availability perspective on the taxi industry alone. So, we would never be able to then try and de-link ourselves from a minibus taxi system. And so there's an absolute dependence because everything else is not working all that well. A smart city, and I'm not going to drop names or anything, but a smart city can easily have pedestrians, cyclists, obviously safely allocated in the space, buses, trams, taxis, all on the same surface, not underground. And then your rail systems generally are underground, and they work so well that at the end of the day, people don't need to use vehicles. But the unfortunate converse has become the case. And so in our pursuits towards a smart city, our freeway improvement program, for example, TFIP, will never be able to cope with the traffic volumes because we've never been able to provide an integrated, reliable transport system that would allow people not to have to use their vehicles, on a daily basis, so that they could commute reliably and safely between work and home. And that's just one aspect. Another area which I, in just as a closing shot on this one is, in dealing with, it doesn't help for us to aspire from one base to something that's completely unrealistic. And if we deal with the realities, we may have a better chance going forward of fixing it. What am I talking about? I'm talking about human settlements. And if informal settlements are going to be an ongoing reality because of the shortage of housing and people, being encouraged to invade land, then maybe we should be more proactive in going ahead and informing those communities and community leaders around spacing your informal settlements so that you can retrofit services once, the dust is settled and so on. Because, unfortunately, it's going to be an ongoing hazard and an inability to be able to improve the lives and the conditions of people who've settled there simply because you can't get an emergency vehicle in and out. One fire burns 100 of those houses. And, there's just no space to fit sewers and water supply. Yep. So we got to think differently on how we approach it with our own reality and not of necessity with these rose-colored glasses around, absolutely developed countries and economies. Thank 100%.
You. Thank you very much there, Mr. Campbell. Perhaps, Mr. Decker, you can come in there. You spoke about the importance of, the residential sector having agency regarding, infrastructure development and so forth. Please unpack that, especially the word buy-in. That's what you use, that we need the buy-in from the residential sector. And I mean, that's a very critical thing there, Mr. Decker, because we're seeing also there's a lot of property hijackings that are happening as well. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm going to talk out of my experience as an architectural professional and being involved with CPD, with architectural professionals, etc. And I think let's go back to the word smart city, smart town, etc. I believe that you cannot have a smart city with a top-down approach where you've got requirements and legislation and you just tell the people, the homeowner, etc., this is what you have to do without educating them first, why it is needed, etc. I believe that if the homeowner and the building owner buy into this whole concept of energy efficiency, of water efficiency, of alternatives, instead of going on like we've done in the past 300 years with systems, etc., to see the benefit that they will have out of that and not just the cost factor. Because unfortunately, some of these things, I've just looked last night at a hybrid electrical system to a new development that I'm busy with at an old age institution, and the costs just to have a small inverter is astronomical, and I always wonder, why is it so astronomical? And people are just accepting certain things without actually investigating alternatives, etc., due to the fact that there's this attitude in this country: you will have to do what we tell you to do, and unfortunately that comes from the city down to the people. When you get building plans approved, etc., there's very little encouragement for alternatives to be investigated by the homeowner, because then our legislation at the moment is so that you have to get in professionals and they have to do rational designs before it can get approved, etc. So we've got all the standards and stuff already in place. We've got energy efficiency, we've got water efficiency, although voluntary, rainwater harvesting. The eastern part of our country where I live has got an abundance of rain. Why don't we start telling people why it is important to have rainwater collection systems, and why it's important, for instance, not to start using the expensive potable water for flushing toilets, etc. Why don't we start putting in alternatives there? Yes, I know it's going to cost a few bucks extra at the beginning, but that is where, for me, the whole concept of smart cities and smart development and all this kind of things starts. And that is by getting the people, the person with his home, etc., that connects to the infrastructure of local authorities, etc., to start taking that into account and to start implementing that. And as soon as everybody starts implementing it, I've read an article the other day on water efficiency. You know, if one person has got a tank and collect rainwater in a city, it's not much. But if 5,000 people start doing it, you can actually see the cumulative effect that it will have on the availability or on the pressure that local authorities have to provide clean water, and we use about 15% of that clean water for actually purposes where we need clean water. Why do we use that? I'm also looking at our sewage systems. We know all our cities, for instance, at the moment, rely on gravity feed systems to sewer plants, etc. Most of these are due to the need for housing and the continuous development of areas, and these plants do not get upgraded. But why don't we go back and be smart and start looking at what we do at our houses at the moment? Why don't we start implementing a semi-treatment of our raw sewer, that we deliver it to the local authority already in a certain stage of treatment, so that it can take a lot of the pressure off the municipal systems? Then we might not have to spend millions and billions of rands in upgrading those infrastructure, and in the meantime allow pollution, etc., to our rivers and stuff. So there's much more to this word smart city, etc. So I believe that the perception at the moment, under professionals and under the public out there, when we talk about smart cities, that is just another bunch of regulations that we have to comply with to make everything fit the local authorities because they don't do their work proper. But the main reason behind this smart is not being communicated downward to the people who can actually start doing it. You can only start it at grassroots level and then work up. You can't have a top-down approach and then try to fix something that's already wrong here at the bottom, because that is not going to work. Thanks.
100%. Thank you very much, Mr. Decker, because based on I don't want to be pompous and say educated opinion. It's just an opinion. It has been that top tier from top down approach. There has not been any active participants from residential areas. I mean, smart is critical, but there are cons to smart as well, pros and cons. And we haven't had active self-determination from these residents who are paying rates and taxes. You know, we don't know, where their money is going, and have they been asked that, do they want some of these connectivities that the term smart brings? So I think you highlighting a very important point to say, let's have agency. How can we be more enabling to ensure that people actually participate and they know what they want? Maybe you can come in there, Dr. Nsime, because you've given quite a broad analysis around the social and economic impact of developing smart cities. We know that with smart cities, it's a huge contributor to urbanization. And we know that with smart cities, it comes with a lot of traffic, it comes with a lot of pollution, crime levels are going up, high energy consumption, difficulty with overstretched social services. How do you think we can address some of these challenges? And I'm bearing in mind that why is this concept also leaving out rural areas who do need some of the advantages that smart cities can bring. But perhaps let's speak about the challenges first.
Yes, no, thank you so much. The good thing, or even the greatest thing that we have in this country is that we don't have shortage of skill, especially technical skills. We don't have shortage of funding. There's plenty of funding. Institutional investors and asset managers and commercial banks, even development finance institutions are sitting with a lot of cash. They're looking for the right projects to invest in. So as my colleagues have already indicated, we've got the right ingredients already. All we need to do is to do the right thing. Firstly, Chris indicated this notion of getting the right people into the right jobs. And there's an author by the name of Jim Collins. His book is entitled Good to Great, meaning that companies, for example, then this is based on the companies investigated in the US, where top 500 top listed companies, high performing companies, high market share, some of them, 11 of them, migrated from being good to great. And he found two key variables which added to his theory and his book as well. One, to say that those companies that transitioned from being good to great, they had the right people. And he uses the analogy of a bus, where he says there were the right people in the right bus. And in those buses, the right seats were occupied by the right people. Another one, he says it was because of leadership, and it's not ordinary leadership. He talks about servant leadership, where the leaders who drove those companies were driven by a lot of passion. They were selfless, they were humble, and they had a vision. So they didn't have to motivate their workers to become good or great. Already they had the right ingredients. So those leaders were able to steer those companies towards the right direction. And I want to use the same analogy into a municipal space. Our municipal space or local government, we've got buses which are full of wrong people. In other instances, we've got the right people in the bus, but they're sitting in the wrong seats. So we know what the problem is. The other day, I was talking to, in a workshop, I asked the delegates to talk about or to list what as a P word in local government, a problematic word in local government. And a lot of them are talking about processes or procedures or policies, but majority of them are talking about procurement. But none of them mention the word people, because that's where we need to start. As I said, the technology is there, the infrastructure is there, the investments are there, but we don't have the right people to drive us from where we are to this ideal of being smart. The former president the other day was talking about, this is our former president Mbeki, and I'll quote, he said, something is wrong with us and not the ANC, meaning that our problems are not external. We've got everything in place. The problems are within. They are with us. The way we behave as leaders, the way we behave as managers, we're not doing the right things. We're doing wrong things, unfortunately, which are costing us, which are costing the country, which are costing even the very same people we're supposed to serve. We are talking about the rural poor. Most of them are migrating, by the way, from the rural areas to small towns, to big cities in search of opportunities. Herein lies the problem. The current infrastructure is unable. Cities of Tshwane, the cities of Joburg are experiencing capacity constraints, and they are not able to operate and maintain fully because of the constrained capacity of infrastructure. So we are in a dilemma. Do we fix what is not working now, or do we jump into smart? All I'm saying is, if Jim Collins is correct, if those that are good want to go to great, let those who are poor then migrate to good, so that we
Yeah.
can then have a clear transition of moving from bad to good, from good to exceptional. So we cannot throw in smart whilst we know that we are dealing with dumb issues. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Ntseme. I really concur with the statement you made that perhaps we do have the right people in the wrong seats, and it's got to change. Perhaps, Mr. Dladla, you can come in there just as alluding and extending from what Dr. Ntseme has said around how do we move from good to great, from great to exceptional, and what does it take in terms of intelligent planning? You did say it starts with planning before we can build. What does intelligent planning entail?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And the contributions by my colleagues has been great, but I have to slightly differ with some of the aspects.
Please do.
I find that sometimes smart cities and sustainable development gets confused and used interchangeably sometimes. The concepts of a smart city is about having cities that are enabled by technology to be able to manage your assets, to be able to manage your resources and ensure service efficiencies. So that aspect I find is that we sometimes abscond as professionals of our responsibility, because you'll find a lot of the planning that happens, even in developing our cities, is done by professionals. We sometimes want to abscond the responsibility to other layers. Doc is correct to saying, there are plenty of ideas, and money, as much as we think is not there, but money is mostly there. It's about the leadership that will move us forward in ensuring that there is a commitment to doing the things that we have promised. And also when it comes to issues around legislations and policies, you have to understand the 12 intervention points that you will find in a system. And Meadow did good work in that, and it's actually quite practical. So saying also information availability is very helpful in changing the system. If our cell phones didn't tell us how much battery was there in terms of percentage, and it just said charge it and you'll have battery for 12 hours, many of us will find ourselves with cell phones that are off most of the time, but the information being directly there. So even with your electricity, being able to see that it's reducing or how fast is it reducing. So the information itself is quite important. When we talk about the enabling legislations to ensure that we can develop smart cities, you look at something like building information system, you will never get to a point of building a digital twin, which is a responsive digital model of physical infrastructure that can do predictive maintenance, so that you can have, that can predict regular maintenance and tell you which parts are likely to break. You will never achieve that if you've designed your system using a traditional approach. So as we design our cities, even as consultants, and we need to look at not turning a whole city, but turning a development first into a smart development where there's a information flow, there's data flow that enables people to make better decisions out of the information that comes out of that. So when you look at something like another problem that I think my learned colleague Chris has also alluded to in terms of water, you look at something like a pressurized pumping system of water. If you know the pressure in that and you're able to record that, you know when to expect demand out of that particular pipe network. You can do simple data analytics to be able to predict when to pump what, and you can save energy. You can save a lot of water from leaking in your system. So that's what we need to also be looking at, as to saying, as we design these systems, as engineers, as architects, as planners, are we putting in the building blocks
Mr. Dladla?
for later generations to be able to apply data and is there to improve on it? Yes, sir. Is my network cutting?
Oh, it did a little bit, but you're back on. It's fine.
Yeah. No, I'm saying as engineers, as planners, as architects, we need to be designing what we have in our responsibility. We need to have the leadership and design systems that will enable future generations to be able to collect the information that is generated by these physical assets, to be able to improve on that. So we must also take the responsibility back to us, who are responsible as infrastructure practitioners for most of the infrastructure that we see around us. But again, Doc is correct that leadership is also quite important to ensure these things happen.
Absolutely, as they are the pioneers of creating these policies and legislation. But thank you very much for that. Perhaps, Mr. Campbell, you can come in here. I still feel and believe that we are excluding rural and township economies when it comes to this narrative around smart cities. How can we integrate them even more?
So I think, we need to be clear on, there's a certain definition of when an establishment or an environment then qualifies to be designated as a city.
Sure.
And we shouldn't confuse the two. And so if we start looking at rural versus urban, then, if your rural cities, if indeed those rural economies, locally driven, can grow to the extent that they're not perceived to be totally urban, but may have larger amounts of office buildings and all of the numbers of people as well, that then qualify them, then that's one aspect. I think we're a long way off that. Our country and our society, unfortunately, has a legacy of everything having been traditionally centered around the railroad network. And unfortunately, what you see is many of the rural settlements, which we may deem to be established towns, when the railways stopped, when the railways no longer stopped in those places, people were still living there. And so the economies there were then purely relegated to being driven by farming and tourism. There was no other forms of economic development that could assist in growing the economies in those areas. And in many instances, I can comfortably say this because at some point in my career, I did work for Transnet Freight Rail. I traveled on the rail network, being responsible for, as part of a team, for the maintenance of that infrastructure. And there are many, many ghost towns across the country that had to be abandoned because people then had to migrate to areas where they could secure employment, be able to feed their families and live, and survive. So if we look at our current rural settlement patterns, then a lot more needs to be done to ensure sustainability, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to get a mass urbanization, which has already happened in many instances, because people need to find ways of surviving and feeding their families. And the urban environment will never be able to keep up with the demands of that urbanization. And so it's important for us to look at both and the connectivity and not neglect the ability and the need to drive some broader sustainability aspects of economic livelihoods in those rural environments, so that people don't feel the need to migrate to the city, which will never be able to keep up. For example, right now, spectrum, the rollout of spectrum. I mean, the slow pace of that rollout is an absolute hamstringing the ability to have that connectivity available even in our rural communities, where they should be able to have that connectivity and not have an absolute dependency on mobile networks, which are very expensive.
Mm.
And I think therein lies an opportunity that, you know, with COVID-19, it has become possible for people to achieve business development and growth and connectivity, you know, from an agricultural environment, networks into supply chains through that connectivity. And if we could get that spectrum rolled out and you could get more connectivity at affordable levels to rural communities, there are business opportunities remotely that can be managed that way, that will enable, you know, entrepreneurs in those environments to grow and thrive, as opposed to finding themselves, you know, between a rock and a hard place and then have to leave to go to the towns like Johannesburg or Cape Town or Durban. You know, so there lies a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. And then I think what we also need to be mindful of is this is not only about the connectivity to what we may deem as rural. This connectivity should apply to the periphery of the city and the city. I mean, in many of your developed cities in the world, you don't need to have, I've seen it up in Fairview in Johannesburg at the fire station. Because there's an open Wi-Fi at the fire station, you find hordes of people just hanging around the fire station because they can connect to Wi-Fi. Why don't we make that connectivity available as a net within the city? And you can limit downloads and those kind of things, but you know, there's ways of controlling it, but an absolute absence just limits even the people who live on the periphery of the city center to tap into that, where data is very expensive from mobile networks, and not everybody can necessarily afford a subscription to now a fiber network. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dekker, maybe you can come in there, just extending from some of the premises that Mr. Campbell shared. How can we guide government to make the right investments in terms of infrastructure?
Yeah, you know, I look at the word smart again, and I believe that we will be smart to start and where the problem is at the moment and where it starts at the moment, instead of having the problem to omit the problem. And that is my whole concept of smart city or smart development, etc. Now, if you go to your so-called rural areas, and I am at the moment in a small town, about 25,000 people in this town, so it is a small to medium town, and I know, and I as MD of the institute, our head offices are in Bedford View. I spend most of my time here in my own office, practice office here in the town, and I look at what's going on around us. Urbanization, I believe, is not just a problem for our bigger cities. If I just look, as I've said, if I just look at around, go out, go into Zululand, go into the other areas, look at your small towns, look at what's happening on the outskirts of those towns. In trust areas, etc. Buildings and especially dwellings are coming up left, right, and center without any formal infrastructure. And if we are smart, I think government should pay attention to this and assist the local authorities there, then to start looking at a smart way of actually providing the infrastructure. And there we have to go not to expensive alternatives, etc. There are cost-effective alternatives available than your normal sewer systems, your normal water supply systems, etc. I think in South Africa we spend billions and billions of rands every year on infrastructure development, which in the end is actually white elephants actually not being utilized as they should, because it was somebody there that, okay, this is what people need here, without getting communities involved and actually together with communities, especially where communities have started settling in areas, be it trust areas or whatever the kind of development it might be, formal or informal, but be involved right from the start there and then get some sort of formality in those type of developments, which can then assist in a smarter infrastructure and therefore a cost-effective management of those infrastructure. And I think that is where the other problem is. We put infrastructure out there, might be smart, might be conventional type of infrastructure, but very little attention at that stage, I believe, has been given to the maintenance and the upkeep of those systems over the next few decades, etc. And that's why we get systems that are not working after 10 years, all these so-called white elephants. So yes, smart cities, they can start there with the smart developments and stuff, but I don't think there is a difference between what happens at the outskirts of Johannesburg or Pretoria or Cape Town or wherever than what's happening in Zululand, what's happening in the Eastern Cape, what's happening in Mpumalanga, what's happening in Limpopo on the outskirts there. I think if you go and look at the population, the density of populations in certain areas there, the density of populations might quite exceed that of some of the formal settlements in our cities.
Sure. Thank you very much. Dr. Nzima, perhaps interchangeably with Mr. Dladla, we can answer this following question. We know that with smart cities, it brings a lot of opportunities. Like you both alluded to, your broadband communication systems, connectivity, etc., etc. But with the growing of smart cities, we are also noticing the huge or vast development of informal settlements. Can we perhaps, dissect that a little bit? Let's start with you, Dr. Nzima, and then we can go with Bongani as well.
Yeah, I think that's obviously a problem of planning, as Bongani alluded to. So integrating those informal settlements is becoming a grave concern because they've grown to such a stage where to move them might probably become impossible because, for instance, I moved into Cape Town in the 80s, and if you drive along the N2, there were actually 1 or 2 shacks along the road. Nowadays, we've got over 500,000 to 1 million. So how do you integrate those? And I see what cities are doing. Instead of moving the people, what they do is they provide them with basic services. So the new trend globally is that because people want to be closer to their places of work, you then look at other alternative housing, for example, affordable and social housing within the proximity of the workplaces. In Cape Town, for instance, there was a project where municipal land was identified where social housing was going to be built, but unfortunately that project fell off. I'm involved currently with social housing in the city of Tshwane. The company is called East Social Housing or City Housing. So we provide people with opportunities for rental units to move away from informal settlements, to move away from areas which are not obviously favorable in terms of their living arrangements. So it is possible, but it's difficult. However, as my colleagues have already said, there are certain basic things that can be done. For example, there's no need to put new infrastructure in place. We need to look at existing infrastructure. It needs to be refurbished. We need to look at high water and electricity losses. We need to plug those, address those. There are smart ways of doing it. For instance, non-revenue water. Technology uses sensors when during the night the floor gets shut down so that there are savings, and units can obviously improve their revenue. So also we need to incentivize private sector investments because private sector is willing to come in to invest, but unfortunately due to regulatory and legislative constraints, that part of investment is being affected. For example, most of our munis are unable to go to the capital market to raise funding because of constraints in their balance sheets. As a result, we at the DBSA, for example, are investigating a number of options, which is not balance sheet funding, which is not project finance, which is not triple Ps, but basic things, for example, getting private sector on board, getting funding on board, and saying to a municipality, let's help you address your non-revenue or your electricity load. We can make a deal where we ring fence future cash flows to be able to repay those debts or funding. If it's possible, then we can do it using our own funding and private sector funding without necessarily burdening the taxpayer with loans and stuff like that. So there are practical examples, there are innovations. However, the problem is traditionally government and local government is used to doing things the traditional or the old ways. If you bring innovation, if you bring in something new, definitely there's resistance and there's pushback, and that is where the problem is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dladla, can you just extend on what Dr. Nzime has said just before we each do our closing remarks?
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. No, thank you very much. Yes, really the issue of people moving from rural areas to urban areas, it's really premised on the challenges of where economic activities are happening. And Doc is correct, and it's something that we can possibly learn from. If you're looking at the rates at how our people are moving from rural areas closer to economic opportunities, and you think at the pace of which social housing can be provided, we really need to think innovatively around this. But it's not something new. For instance, if you look at how India have dealt with some of these challenges, it is to provide, as Chris has also indicated, the basic services like your water, your sanitation, all the open land parcels, which I think government is also starting now to releasing some of those land parcels, demarcate them, make them livable spaces. But you would have provided an opportunity for those that can afford to be able to build their own housing aspect. And it's been done in India, and I think there are some parts of Durban where it was piloted. That aspect would also assist us as we deal with the challenge of urbanization, people moving and not having sufficient housing in those areas. There's another aspect, and I think Mr. Dak was also alluding to, the issue around social facilitation as we undertake infrastructure projects. You know, that aspect, I think we've developed very good frameworks on how to do it. But in action, it sort of becomes a tick box exercise. I have seen that in Duna, I have seen that community, and then it becomes a tick box exercise, which is also another fundamental aspect of infrastructure development that could help to solve many problems, like projects where communities will not feel full ownership of, because those projects also, even during the construction stage, you find there's a lot of protection by the communities because they feel ownership of that piece of infrastructure to aid in service delivery. So there are a few things that we can do as professionals and professional bodies as we undertake our work to ensure that the infrastructure that we put in place, it does make sense in terms of sustainable development, but also put in the building blocks for us to be able to turn some of these projects into contributing meaningfully towards smart cities in future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dladla. Indeed, 100%. I think it is a cause for concern, but there is a solution to it where access can be provided. And it just also begs the question of how can, local opportunities be created? How can rural opportunities be created? How can we convert them to be smart, not necessarily as smart cities, but just to ensure that there's just a circulation of regional economies that are being developed and there is no congestion, because urbanization is becoming toxic, especially when it comes to environmental health and environmental sustainability. And I think it's not thoroughly being addressed in that manner because we are a third world country after all, which we are trying to make our way past that stage and that narrative. It's now time for our closing remarks. So as you answer, there is one question that has been posed by Tabani. You can just integrate it with your closing remark. Tabani, on smart city development, I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country is maintaining infrastructure. How can we be sure that these smart cities will be well maintained? Will they be privatized to run them well? Does ESCOM challenges affect these smart cities? So with your closing remark, as well as answering this question, I will start with you, Mr. Campbell, then we'll have Mr. Decker, Mr. Zala, and Dr. Patrick.
So
In the last
thank you. And you know, I think it's always great for us to dare to dream. Our reality is we've got to make what we have work first.
Yeah.
And that means fixing what we have. I think there are too many weak points. Power supply, water is going to be likely a new what should we call it?
Threat?
The kind of experiences we have with outages on electricity, unfortunately, are going to flow into water because there's a backlog in the distribution systems and so forth to cope with the needs of communities, etc., etc. So I would like for us to, I would almost say that we need to put our energy into fixing what we have so that it is at this point functional, and start looking and planning for a future smart city environment that we would like to have. But that means also looking after some of the smart buildings we have already. And unfortunately, in our pursuits of smart, we haven't necessarily thought them out entirely. For example, early on, we spoke about green buildings and sustainability and using lots of glass facades for natural light. But guess what? They become excessively hot. So you need to run air conditioning systems which rely on energy. So your carbon footprint goes up, not down. So, you know, and I think in the other elements, I think there's a lot of education we need of all of our people across the country around water use, water reuse, all of the above. So my parting shot would be, let's put all our energy into fixing what we have, and we can move from there, because, you know, to assume that we can now leapfrog what's broken into something that we to an ideal that we aspire to may be a bridge too far. So I think we've got to work with what we have, fix it, make it work, and then move forward from there. And addressing very critically the people issue.
Yeah.
I almost, you know, I want to say that we must be careful of assuming that we've got the right people in the wrong seats. You've got a lot of passionate people deployed in government who have the ability. I think the hardest task is going to be, how do we in private sector and public sector make sure that you have the right people in the right places with the passion of the patriotism that we all need to fix and make it work for the future. Thank you.
Thank you there, Mr. Campbell. Much appreciated. It's truly important. Let's fix it. Let's fix what we have. Mr. Decker, your parting remarks?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, if we look at smart, you know, we have to be smart to be smart. It doesn't help that you want to be smart and by having a budget for a Korean motor, try to have or to buy a German motor or something, or a motor car, etc. So the first thing is there, be smart, and smart cities, or cities, be smart in actually going for what is sustainable, what you can afford, and what can be done on the grassroots level. And when I talk to professionals, I always say to them, being a built environment professional in architecture, engineering, etc., the Constitution say that we all have got the right to a safe and a sustainable environment. And we as professionals, are the designers of those environments. And I think local authorities are the curators of that environment in many cases. And therefore, as local authorities and as professionals in the built environment, I think we've got a huge task on us laid down by our constitution, by the people of this country, to make sure that whatever we do is not going to create unsafe, unsustainable environments, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To be smart, you've got to be smart. Definitely taking that away, Mr. Dekker. Thank you. Can we have Dr. Patrick, and then we'll have it closing as well from Mr. Dladla.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So with all the challenges and problems we've highlighted today, definitely herein lies a lot of opportunities for job creation, for entrepreneurial development. But that can only happen if we change the current service delivery models.
Sure.
Models that says government can do it on its own. Government can deliver social and economic. It happen through partnerships. That is community, public, private partnerships. Therefore, we need to spend our energies into creating new ways of doing things, new smart ways of thinking. As Chris was saying, we need to inspire our employees. We need to change and create a new saving culture. We need to create servant leaders. When we started in 1994, we had plenty of servant leaders. I don't know what happened to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We also don't know what happened, but hopefully that can be restored, and the true gems that ever had for the people can come back. Thank you so much there, Dr. Nzimi. Mr. Dladla.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, colleagues. And it was quite an interesting discussion, and I do hope we can take it forward because, sitting around the table are also people charged with the responsibility of ensuring that leadership is provided in the built environment to ensure that also the practitioners take their role in providing this leadership. Servant leadership will not only come also from politicians, but also from us professionals, community leaders, civil society, to ensure that we don't abscond our responsibilities. Yes, the issue of maintenance, as the one of the participants has raised as a question, is really something we need to discuss seriously as a country as to actually putting action towards it. I know it's not as shiny as opening a new bridge or designing a new treatment plant, but it actually saves us a lot of money in the long run and provides better service delivery than only attempting to build new infrastructure. But it is an important discussion that a lot of stakeholders have a role to play, and I do hope we continue the conversation with the colleagues as we find practical solutions to some of our challenges that our people face.
100%. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Chris Campbell, CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa, Mr. Frans Dekker, Managing Director for the South African Institute of Architectural Technologies, and Mr. Bongani Dladla, CEO of Construction Industrial Development Board, and last but not least, Dr. Patrick Nzimi, Acting Head at DBSA. Thank you very much for your insights and all your contributions as well. And we do believe that they will definitely make a difference to all the viewers that are watching and the organizations and institutions involved. Take good care, and thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Much appreciated.
With less inclusive C-suites, yet women remain underrepresented in all levels of management. To bridge this gap, the UN Global Compact launched Target Gender Equality, an accelerator program that helps our participating companies set and meet ambitious corporate targets for women's representation and leadership in business. Companies that commit to the accelerator program are not only equipped with the latest data and research, but they also then join a growing network of partners who are working collectively to tackle the barriers to closing the gender gap from the C-suite through to the supply chain and into the communities that these companies serve. Now let's hear from some of the participating companies directly.
It has been 1 year Since our participation in Target Gender Equality, the initiative has been helpful to us. We have understood the importance of not just setting overall targets, but interim targets as well. We have seen the number of female employees in management level has increased. We are already working on how to improve facilities for ensuring better, comfortable and safe work environment. We are even conducting monthly meetings discussing the progress of Target Gender Equality. We would highly recommend other companies to join the Target Gender Equality program.
As a UN Global Compact participant, this program allows us to accelerate our practices of the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles. We benefit from the action planning guides, workshops and real-world examples provided by the program, which helped us creating a dedicated roadmap for our contribution to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
One thing we have learned is that regardless of how big or small your company is, or how male-dominated your sector is, you can make a difference.
Join the Target Gender Equality Accelerator today.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our second panel discussion. We are now entering the food security seminar. And in this particular panel discussion, we are discussing the ocean economy. Please don't forget to hashtag SUSWeek 2022. That is hashtag SUSWeek 2022. And also feel free to visit our virtual 3D exhibition and engage with our exhibitors that are online. Remember, you do stand a great chance to win. Thank you. We are receiving your comments. We are receiving your questions. Please feel free to add them also into this discussion. Joining me this morning to have quite a poignant conversation around the ocean economy across the globe and across Africa, we have Associate Professor for University of Ghana, Professor Kwasi Addo. We also have Ms. Zaidi Efren, who's an Island Innovation Ambassador for Blue Economy Research at the Blue Innovation Institute. We have the Deputy Director for One Ocean Hub, Dr. Bernadette Snow. We also have the Managing Director for Fish Forever at Rare, Ms. Rocky Torona. We also have the Vice Chair for SAP FIA, which I'm looking forward to hear what the abbreviation for that is, Ms. Shamira Daniels. Welcome to all of you. Let me hand over to our Professor Addo just to do the introductions. Over to you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, and hello to the panel members. My name is Kwasi Addo. I'm a professor in coastal processes in the University of Ghana, and also the director for the Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies. My research areas focus more on coastal processes, looking at coastal erosion and coastal dynamics, and how the nearshore processes affect the issues within the coastal environment. So thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Can we have Zaidi?
Hi, welcome everybody to this session. I'm Zaidi. A lot of work that I do in islands recently has heavily focused on the blue economy sectors, in particular small-scale fisheries and fishing industries, commercial fisheries, workforce, and tourism sector, all of which depends heavily on coral reef ecosystems and coastal communities. A little bit background, considering fish and fisheries agreements and small-scale fisheries. I have worked as an officer in charge in fisheries with governments for a while. Looking forward today to bring you some policy and operational discussions to really see how we meet the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaidi. Truly looking forward to that. Dr. Snow?
Good morning to everyone. I'm speaking to you from Scotland today, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panel. As already mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director for the One Ocean Hub, which is a large UKRI-funded program at the University of Strathclyde. I'm also adjunct professor at Nelson Mandela University at the Institute for Coastal and Marine Research. And my research is focused around social and ecological systems. So looking at it from a systems perspective and food security from that point of view. We were asked to also just give a little bit of a positioning and maybe be a little bit think of things like one sees mariculture or aquaculture as a panacea to solve all ills, or that we should have infrastructure development without thinking about the other aspects and components within the system. And I think we need to look at food production in light of securing livelihoods as well, but also to take a systems view and also to ensure that coastal communities are not impacted negatively. There's future thinking, in other words, taking climate change, ecosystem services into account, and also to make sure that there is an inclusive approach with other users, and also, the environmental protection components that are needed to secure livelihoods and to secure food into the future. And if we don't take this broader lens and connect policies, and connect different development initiatives in this way, I fear we will not be securing livelihoods into the future, because we will destroy the very livelihoods that exist today.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Snow, and welcome from Scotland indeed. Thank you. Rocky?
Hi, hello everyone. Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Rocky Sanchez Tirana. I work with the RARE, which is a nonprofit that focuses on behavior-centered solutions to environmental challenges. I run a program called Fish Forever, which is focused on coastal fisheries. In today's discussion, I'm really here because I wanted to bring the perspective of small-scale fisheries and the coastal communities that depend on them. It's a portion of the ocean that doesn't always get counted when we talk about economy, because the data isn't very clean. But in truth, the contributions of this band of ocean are outsized, right? A large portion of the world's small-scale fisheries come from coastal waters. We're talking about 0 to 12 nautical miles from shore. It's just 6% of the ocean, but it's actually home to 70% of marine biodiversity. And, over 113 million people depend on small-scale fisheries for employment or subsistence. Many of them are women, and they produce 40% of the global fish catch, almost all of which goes to human consumption. So this is, in terms of the impact, on food security, on jobs, livelihoods, and the fact that coastal communities are among the most climate vulnerable people on the planet, I think we cannot ignore how we're managing these coastal waters. And
100%. Looking forward to engaging further on how can we better manage them indeed. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ms. Daniels.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Shamira Daniels. So SAPFIA stands for the South African Pelagic Fishery Industry Association.
Okay.
So we a recognized industrial body that represents the small pelagic fishery, which is your anchovy and your pilchards. So your canned fish on your shelf, that is the products, that is the outcome from our side, and then fish meal as well, which is, I think, fundamental to food security. Our organization represents about 70 to 80% of the commercial right holders in South Africa. I myself am a SMME right holder. I'm the MD of a majority Black-owned, women-run fishing company. And I think there's a much needed voice for that in our industry. And it's a big fight for us to be involved in a meaningful manner. As a side note, I know we're not talking about that today, but I think it's always important to just always have it on the agenda. I think for me, the importance of food security right now is vital. It's on the back of us having an engagement with government around oil and gas and seismic surveys in the ocean. And when the issue of food security came up, we said, it was almost a catchphrase of you can't eat oil. And the response was, but you need oil for everything. And my response to that is, well, it's good and well I have diesel in my vessel, but if there's no fish to catch anymore, what's the point of having diesel in my vessel? What's the point of having gas for your stove if there's no food to put on the stove? And that's a broader, a more important conversation that we have to have on an ongoing basis. That food is a fundamental need and a right of people. And jobs and the economy is important. But if there's no food, people can have all the money in the world. But if there's no food, it means absolutely nothing. So that's my start to the conversation.
100%. An important angle that you've added there, the participation of women and the participation of Black women essentially in that space. So it is relevant and it is critical. So I've noted that down. Perhaps let's go back to you, Professor. You spoke about, your department also looks into coastal erosion. What has been happening? Because we've also noted that aquaculture has been contaminated. Our oceans are no longer healthy, and a lot of the powers that be or multinational corporations that are responsible for this coastal erosion are not being accountable. So perhaps you can add a bit more commentary around that.
All right, thank you very much. I think I also try and link it to food security. You realize that if you don't have a healthy coastal environment, you cannot be assured of a secured, environment or a secured future where we have abundance of food. So having a healthy environment means that we have environment that is being able to ensure that the ecosystems are thriving and ecosystems are providing what they need to provide. Now, coastal erosion is a major issue in several countries, especially in developing countries where it becomes a huge challenge in terms of managing erosion. And it affects the communities, affect people who are into, or they affect the sources of livelihood of people within these communities, especially those into small-scale fishing. You realize that a lot of these fishers land their catch on natural landing sites. So once you have erosion, then it becomes difficult to land your catch. And once you can't land your catch, then you can think about the consequences in terms of increasing poverty. So eroding coastlines are a major threat to ensuring food security. And again, as the coastal areas are eroding, you are also thinking about their impact on coastal tourism. So once you have eroding coastline, then coastal tourism also becomes affected. And communities where people work within these hospitality industries also get affected. So managing erosion should be looked at a holistic approach and looking at all the issues, because you can't talk about the economics of the coastal area without looking at the health of the coastal system. So I see coastal erosion as a major threat in enhancing food security moving into the future. And I think it should come into the equation when we are discussing issues of coastal economy.
100%. Thank you very much for that. Perhaps, Sadie, you can come in here, looking at the policy dynamics and, of course, how the ocean economy has been operationalized. Tell us about the challenges in your organization that small-scale farmers have experienced, and how can they better be integrated into the ocean economy?
Thank you. I think it's a good question of inclusivity, especially when, in overall fishing industry, globally, regionally, between either its islands or Africa region or developing states, small-scale fisheries operations have been, overlooked and continues to be overlooked in terms of businesses, right? So, as you know, islands and small island developing states, we are actually shifting the discussion away from ocean economy to what we are moving in negotiation calling blue economy, where we really emphasize inclusivity, social inclusion that has to come in with this concept, right? At the same time, environmental sustainability to meet the economic demands. Now, when it comes to small players, they probably would not fit in the, policy structures that has been there, and also the policy structures that have been there for, pelagic fishery or large-scale fishery. So new opportunities arises under Ministry of Industries or small medium enterprises. That this is where fishing commercial fishermen can be now more leaning towards sort of moving into business angles rather than, under the fisheries divisions where the policies have never been really supportive to them. So these are some new business angles to look at. And I think one of the other things that earlier has come on is, women involvement and women empowerment through financial sustainability. Because if we're looking at food security from a bigger picture of sort of bringing human security, economic security, then it has to finally be in a business portfolios that is providing for all.
Sure. Thank you very much. Dr. Snow, maybe you can come in here around, you spoke about a lot of dynamics. One of the important ones being the ecological system around, aquaculture. Tell me more about that.
Thank you for the question. And I think this also links to what already has been said from a policy perspective, but in particular what Prof. Addo has mentioned. So, you know, having aquaculture or mariculture, just as you will have farming on land or, you know, adjacent to the coast, one needs to do very careful planning. So aquaculture is within an environmental system, within an ecosystem, and has impacts on an ecosystem. So it may not only be producing food, but also if the ecosystem can't deliver the services required for a healthy aquaculture or mariculture, for example, we're pumping sewage into the ocean, or we're have pollutants running in, or we are continuing with microplastics that are entering into, you know, the shellfish or the fish that we're catching, you're impacting on the health of the product and the quality of the product. So you can have a brilliant business case, but if your product is not saleable because it's contaminated, it's polluted, it's undersized, it doesn't look right because of some of the chemicals that impact on you know, how fish grow and look, interfere with the genetics, and we don't even know half or even more than half of what the actual impact of microplastics is going to have on human health. So we may be producing food, but we're not producing quality or healthy food. And we really need to understand that we can't just tackle growing businesses for the sake of growing, because this also links to what Shamira said. If there's no fish, there is no business. There's no industry. If there is a mariculture venture and that's not working, you know, you won't even be making money. You won't be able to enter into the market because there's also quality checks and quality controls to enter into the market. So, and mariculture isn't an answer for small scale, you know, subsistence type food. It's, you know, it is going into a business venture. It takes a lot of capital, infrastructure, money, capacity, you know, training to run a successful mariculture venture.
100%. Rocky, maybe you can just add there, particularly around, you know, you opened up with speaking about how we need to really pay attention to the environmental challenges that affect the ocean economy. What are the suitable strategies that we can apply to ensure that, you know, the environment is healthy? Because now food is becoming a danger to our health. Food is becoming the founding, you know, tool or father of diseases, you know. So maybe you can just add more to what Dr. Snow has alluded to.
Sure. So I think that for the kinds of communities that we're talking about and the area of the ocean that they're attached to, I think, you know, the fundamental principle should be that those closest to the resource and the most dependent on them really have to have agency over how they're protected and managed, right? So we think that in the past, small-scale fisheries and coastal fisheries have been not well managed, partly because of just top-down interventions and strategies that really don't take into account the communities that are living there. Very scattered, they're very disaggregated. And so we think that the best solutions are really the ones that are community-led and area-based in that sense, right? So in our case for Fish Forever, we really work with communities to establish a combination of protected areas or areas where there are no-take zones, but at the same time, managed or sustainable use areas around those no-take zones where the fishers understand that the protecting and managing habitats and helping fish populations recover will actually benefit them because they're the ones that are actually going to get to fish in the areas as they recover, right? So to us, that's something that we need to be helping more communities establish and do in partnership with local governments, national governments, but there really has to be co-management and devolution of authority to these communities. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. You know, I think a lot of other strategies have been tried in the past and they really just don't stick.
Thank you very much. Ms. Daniels, what are the challenges that you have been exposed to, or the limitation to access the market, particularly with some of the entrepreneurs, the women that you're working with? Just take me through that a bit.
So it depends on what sector you're in, right? So for us, for instance, in the small pelagic sector, you have the barrier to entry is quite high. Your vessels are medium ranged in terms of pricing. So to own your own vessel, you're looking, a brand new vessel is about 40 million rand. I don't know, do I need to translate that into dollars? I wouldn't know what that is right now. And then you're bigger, to put up a processing facility for a fish meal plant, you're looking at 300 to 500 billion rand, right? Million rand, sorry. So it's a $500 million that you need. So the access to the value chain, as we call it the value chain, is vitally important for everybody. But it is also to identify. So we in South Africa, we also have a small scale fishery, and it's all different. The small scale sector has access to different sectors. So for us specifically in small pelagics, we don't have direct dealings with small scale, but our infrastructures are in the communities, and our factories employ people from the community. So in that way, we are linked, we are the community. You might be a commercial industry. People keep referencing community and people think it's only those individual fishermen. But as businesses in the community that provide jobs, that provide secondary and, the trickle-down effect, you are part of the community. Because if the community is not healthy in the sense that people are unhappy or there isn't enough food going through the community, it does impact your business as well. So from the small pelagic industry, there has been a shift from the bigger industry players. So, and that's the other thing. So in our industry, you have your SMME players like me. So an easier place to enter is to be a vessel owner. So that's what I own my own vessels, and then I deliver my fish to a factory that then processes the fish, and then the marketing from there. So for me, the next step on would be to get access to either shareholding in a factory, and then by virtue of that, getting access to the markets. We've just come out of renewal of fishing quotas. So for the last few years, there's been a lot of uncertainty and upheaval in our industry because we weren't sure who was going to end up with what. So there was very little planning that could happen. So I think if we have a similar engagement in 3 years' time, I'll be having a different conversation with you because we would have been able to enter into those discussions because now we know what we have. I think on another, so I wear many hats. So the hat that I'm here today is for Vice Chair of SAPFIA, but I'm also independent chair of the West Coast Rock Lobster Association. So I don't have any fishing quotas, that I'm an independent chair. And in that sector, you do have your small scale communities, your individual fishermen, and you have companies that are operating in the space. And then we're having to deal with illegal fishing, which is leading to the decline of the sector. So it's the conversation is to bring everybody in the legal sector. So your small scale, we call them nearshore, is your individual fishermen, and your offshore, which is your commercial fishermen, come together with a common goal, instead of wasting time almost in an adversarial relationship, which it's almost encouraged sometimes, I find. Whereas if you put everybody around the table, the name of the game is to grow the resource so that the pie is bigger so that everybody benefits from it. So that's why I'm saying the scenario is so different from sector to sector. So it's a very difficult answer to give you. Sorry if I'm all over the show. It's just if you get me started, I can sit and talk to you for hours about this. But it's just, for me, it's just when you try and approach things with a one-size-fits-all mentality, you're already losing. You need to go, and even from community to community, the solutions are different. The way you engage is different. And the quicker the policymakers get that, I think the quicker we'll get to where we need to be.
100%.
I don't know if that answers what you asked.
No, 100%. All good. Thank you. Professor Addo, maybe you can come in here. We've given light to the, environmental challenges of the ocean. Now let's speak about the ocean economy. And you put a lovely term to it, the coastal economy. How can we rebuild a resilient, sustainable coastal economy? So how can we secure economic activity around the coast, particularly as an African continent?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think a resilient coastal economy can be built if we have a resilient coastal systems. Because the coastal systems that would ensure that activities within the coastal environment thrives. And having a resilient coastal systems means that you need a healthy coast. And to me, having a resilient coastal systems means that you also need a resilient coastline. So moving into the future, how do we ensure that our coastline is resilient to all the pressures and all the forces that are, coming to play within the coastal environment? And to me, that is key, because do we ensure that the level of development go hand in hand with the level of ensuring a sustainable, resilient coastline? That is what I look at, because you can have all the activities going on, but if our coastline is not resilient, we cannot have a sustainable coastal economy or ocean economy. Why am I saying that? You realize that a lot of infrastructure development are going on. And these infrastructure development, we now need to understand how they are impacting the coastal systems, how they are impacting the shoreline. Because once these infrastructure, that will result in a boom in economic activities are going on, they are having effect on the environment. And like my colleague said, we need a healthy environment, a healthy coastal environment to be able to achieve what we desire to have so far as coastal economy is concerned. So to me, coastal economy can be achieved, or the optimum with regards to coastal economy can be achieved if we have a resilient coastal system. If we don't have a resilient coastal system, it will be very difficult to have a sustainable coastal economy. That's where I'm coming from. We need to be mindful of the development within the coastal environment. A situation, especially in Africa, a situation whereby we do things anyhow, must stop. The business as usual approach in relating to the coastal environment must stop. We should have a clear-cut plan. And this clear-cut plan must bring on board all the relevant issues. And once we have that, then we can be sure that moving into the future, we can have a sustainable ocean economy.
100%. Zaidi, maybe you can come in here, just as extended from Professor Addo. If we can paint a picture, how does this coastal system look like on a practical term? How does it look like?
Okay, just, if you look at from coastal engineering or physical perspective, we're looking at mangrove systems, we're looking at seagrass systems, we're looking at, coral reef systems, we're looking at, in water flow and align mixing with fresh, seawater. So all kind of, environmental ecosystems that are sort of going under the water. So, another thing is, as I'm a dive professional, many times people just, are not connected to the underwater life the way some other people may be, and they're not able to relate to those systems. So one is that. But if you look at from the social perspective of coastal systems, you will have, small scale communities in one area to a heavy development coastal hotel in opposite to each other. So these are people systems, or development systems. At the same time, road or traffic, let's say, ferries are moving between two different coastlines, maritime. So all of those, there are different things going on when we talk about systems. And again, coming from an environmental perspective, needing to bring a social perspective, and also like economic lines, where are the blue economic lines? Okay, fish is getting, as my colleague highlighted earlier from Safia, like a value chain. That is the economic line. That is also an economic system that is moving the good from under the water to the table. So all of that to me is a system that we are needing to really look at in a very integrated manner, so something that is a very mixed up a recipe of a food item that you could think of, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Snow, perhaps you can come in here in informing us about how do we develop sustainable low carbon food systems using, maritime, using the ocean economy?
That's actually a really difficult question to answer.
I'm sorry. I don't even have the answer myself.
And I cannot give you the answer because it is really that complex. And as Zadie has said, it's a system within a system within a system.
Yeah.
And often when we talk about oceans, blue, coastal, as soon as we tag economy on, we focus on the economic system. We also focus on things like the SDGs that are related with human health and well-being. We talk about things like gender and equality. We bring in poverty alleviation, and then we focus our conversations around that, often forgetting interconnected social systems, so context-based. As already our colleagues have said, you can go from one part of the African coast to another part who have a completely different connection with the ocean environment, have different social systems, have different value chains, and also different legal customary laws, as well as other, in-country laws that differ and often compete with one another.
Yeah.
So I would say sustainability can only be achieved if it's inclusive. In other words, it's bottom-up co-development of different sectors working together, not being pitted against one another in terms of saying it's going to create millions and millions of jobs. An important word that Rocky used was also agency. If we take away the agency, and this has to filter up into policy, and the policies then need to bring these particular focuses and lenses together. So we can't just as a government top down say we are going to create X million jobs. We're going to create so many things in the blue economy that the ocean is an untapped bottomless resource. Where that's business as usual, just growing. And so I think, if we listen to what everyone has said here in the room today, it needs inclusivity. We need to understand it's a complex system within a system. And we also need to, if we're going to build sustainability, which what this summit is all about, sustainability is reliant on the environment and a healthy, functional social system. Put those two together, the economy will follow. It's not central. Without people, there is no economy. So, we need to understand that. And there's no in people if there's no environment. So we need to bring these systems together, not see it as this quick fix, quick win, let's solve all of these problems, because we're creating more problems. We're increasing the divide, we're increasing inequality, we are increasingly marginalizing people who depend and are connected to our ocean spaces from coast to deep water. We need to understand what we do on land has huge impact on what happens in the coastline. So land-based pollution, land management, agriculture on land is just those food systems are connected to coastal ocean food systems. And, in both ways, if we're producing fish meal, what are we producing fish meal for? Agriculture, to feed animals on land-based. And so massive, intensive farming can no longer continue because we have climate change on our doorstep. And if we don't start realizing that small food systems are possibly the way to go, and tie in with sustainable, regulated and implemented policies in our bigger, larger food systems, then we're never going to attain that sustainability. So unfortunately, I don't have the roadmap. I don't have the answer, but we just can't continue the way we are, and we can't just keep on touting blue economy as the savior of all.
And Dr. Snow, that is the answer, actually. Perhaps we can add Rocky here just to extend on the question. Rocky, your inputs?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I think Dr. Snow kind of like painted the whole system and the whole picture really well. I totally agree that a lot of this really has to do with the social systems and the people behind it. And I think the other point that maybe is really helpful for policymakers to really focus on is that for whom is this development, and for whom is this development of the ocean economy for?
Sure.
Right? So it's not just about generating more food to make it to the supermarkets, but it's really food first for the ones that are already depending on the resource, because that's really their main source of food and livelihood. So I think making sure that the policy structures are set up so that the people closest to the resource are able to make those decisions that can really impact both how the environment is being either managed or protected or secured against and having a say in the decisions that are being made about these areas, and then at the same time giving them the ability to secure more benefits from the work that they're doing, either through retaining their wealth, being able to access better markets, but that ultimately they are the ones that will benefit from this resource.
100%. Thank you so much for that. Let's go to you, Shamira. Perhaps you can just give us practical solutions to ensure that we have, or maybe let me put it as, what are the nature-based solutions that we can have to adapt to sea level rise, eutrophication? It just shows I'm not a specialist of the ocean. We had to learn these terms, but just, better maintenance to ensure this food security. What are the nature-based solutions that we can apply?
Can I ask, what do you mean by nature-based solutions?
So things that are natural, because, you've got access to entrepreneurs or small-scale.
I can only comment on the South African fishing industry, and
that's fine.
There's a lot that people can say our government does wrong, right? But in fishing, it's very well managed. If anything, it's a global kind of accepted fact that our fisheries are well managed. If anything, our government or the department that manages fisheries is sometimes too conservative. And I think maybe this is the juncture to say, industrialized fishing or commercial fishing is always an easy scapegoat. But the reality for us is, if I invest in a 40 million rand vessel, I'm not going to go out and plunder the ocean, because then there's going to be no fish in 2 years and I'm going to be sitting with debt that I can't pay. The name of the game for me is sustainability. It is to stick to the total allowable catches, which is you're talking about the natural. How do we bring that in? The sticking to the total allowable catches and not overdoing it, and encouraging entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of CSI programs around. I saw we're busy now engaging with a company that's looking at biodegradable fishing nets. So it is something, and it's in our best interest. We don't want the ocean poisoned. because that's our business. If you can't eat the fish we catch, we don't have a business. So there's a big push for that, you know. How do we make our vessels more efficient is linked to global warming. I mean, if you look at the spike of the diesel price in the last while, it's potentially crippling to us. So we need to look at ways of using less diesel. You know, it's not even something that needs to be forced on us. It's business decisions that we have to make us stay competitive globally and to stay in business. I don't know if that answers your question. But I mean, there are ongoing initiatives from our side. We work closely with the environmental groups because we all play in the same space. You know, the name of the game is to keep the ocean as resilient and as healthy as possible, because then we all win.
Awesome. Rocky, maybe you can come in here, then I'll have Zaidi and Professor Ado, and then I will ask you to do your closing remarks. Rocky?
Sure. I just wanted to add a little bit on your question around the nature-based solutions. I think there are some kind of like very basic things that are overlooked, right? You know, so one is really the protection of habitats and helping, giving them the chance to recover. And protected areas have kind of like acquired a bit of a negative effect because people think of it as just off limits and really just for conservation. But if you do it properly and you're really thinking about optimizing them for better fisheries recovery, you could protect, but at the same time make sure that they're actually generating benefits for people. At the same time, very specific things around behaviors that the community or that fishers can do can also help. Things like leaving the herbivores alone, for example, so that they keep coral reefs healthy. Those are things that if you're able to help people understand why that's important and why they should maybe stay away from certain types of fish, but that will actually help the whole ecosystem recover in the future. So I think there's these kinds of strategies that if they're integrated into the fisheries management interventions that Shamira was describing, I think can really make for a more resilient ecosystem.
Thank you, Zaidi. Thank you, Rocky, sorry. Zaidi, can you expand on that? I feel like I'm in a movie. You know, you have all unique names. There's Snow, there's Rocky, there's Zaidi. You know, it's such a beautiful combination. Anyway, Zaidi, would you like to extend on that?
Yeah, I think two things that I want to kind of pinpoint. One is that I'm hearing a lot in the panel, you know, policymakers had to be doing that, or a lot is about top-down approaches. Now, some of the role that I'm currently leading, and that is as an ambassador, I get to engage with policymakers, leaders at the same time with industry, from fishermen to all sorts of marine operations. And I really, we have our, this is Daniel who spoke about what actually it entails, what is the workforce challenges. And some of these bigger questions that policymakers actually really need sort of to prep them what is needed. And SDGs today has created that space in the government. SDG 14 in particular has created a space in the policy regime to kind of discuss about interlinked policy processes. However, we are looking at that if there's local organizations and local institutions, if they can partner together to provide fact sheets and policy briefing to policymakers, then there are more likely chances to come together and discuss on the common circle. The next thing I think I wanted to highlight, somebody questioned about blue carbon. These technologies are arising new, it has been there, but it's coming more and more discussed in terms of blue carbon budgets, blue carbon, credits. One has to know that this blue carbon discussion is arising from the UNFCCC discussions, right? So it is coming from a very different convention, at the global level. And it is a discussion that is heavily still within the scientific realm, especially ocean acidification and blue carbon research. But we're looking at basically more mangroves, salt marshes, sea grass meadows that can be protected in the systems where fixed carbon can be found. So that was something that I just wanted to add. But back to something that I really like about the forum today is that it's we are aware, policymakers are very well aware of the problems. They're looking for solutions. And our young professionals, our institutions can hold them accountable via the Sustainable Development Goals. The business can hold policymakers accountable via the Sustainable Development Goals because it is also for them. So it is a policy framework that for the first time, it is for across many stakeholders that could be using this. So to me, I'm very positive about that, policy making could be more creative and innovative in moving ahead to 2030.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Professor Ado and Dr. Snow, you can come in here. And this is posed to the both of you. Ado, you can go first. Ocean economy, is there a huge opportunity for us to use waste and technology to clarify some of these challenges that we have in the ocean economy and some of the environmental challenges that we have posed?
Yeah, I think I will come in, and but let me contribute a bit to the nature-based solution from the point of coastal protection. I see nature-based solution as the future way of managing the coastal systems. Our method of managing coastal changes in terms of dynamics within the nearshore has always been fighting the natural dynamics. But I think it's about time we begin to think about working with nature so that we allow nature to naturally evolve. And that, to me, is the way forward. We can't continue to fight the natural dynamic and win this fight. It is not possible. Because once you tackle a challenge at a point, what you are doing is that you are basically transferring that challenge or problem to another location. And do we have the strength to fight the entire shoreline or the coastline? It is not possible. So the nature-based solution is the way forward. If you take mangrove restoration, for instance, we can look at, coastal protection areas. We can look at, depending on how we call it, but mangrove restoration has the potential to also fight naturally erosion. So you don't need to put in artificial structures if you have your mangroves, because the mangroves will fight erosion, which will also reduce the impact of storm activities and reduce the impact of flooding. So you realize that nature-based solution is the way to go. Where we cannot, we can think about hybrid. Now, what are the issues, like the question you raised? Ocean economy, and then, I think I'm trying to recollect your question.
Is there an opportunity for an interface between the ocean economy, technology, and also the green economy? Green, we speak about recycling, we speak about different forms of energy, even waste. I mean, we can convert the waste in the ocean into money as well, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, there are lots and lots of opportunities and research. Currently, we are doing a research on looking at how, sargassum is becoming a major problem now in some part of the world. In West Africa, sargassum is becoming a major problem. And we are even seeing it as an emerging risk. But because it's affecting the small-scale fishing industry and affecting the tourism industry, because once the sargassum beaches, the stench that comes out, has an impact on tourism. But we are looking at how can we develop economic opportunities from sargassum, which we consider as a waste. And you realize that if you look at what we are calling waste, if we can give new life to waste, the waste can become a product. And can we use sargassum as a fertilizer for food production? Can we use sargassum as feed or fish feed? Can we use sargassum in construction? Some are researching into the possibility of adding sargassum to construction materials to strengthen them. So you see that there is nothing called waste when it comes to the coastal environment. What we consider waste, we can give it a new life. So I think there are a lot of opportunities within the coastal environment, and these are in terms of what we call waste. And these opportunities, we can turn them around and better the lot of people who live within the coastal environment, particularly the poor within the communities. These waste can be turned around and made good for them, and they can generate some income from these waste. Again, technology is the way to go. You know, we need to have enhanced technology within the coastal system so that we can reduce the challenges that, you know, we are encountering within the coastal community. So I don't think we have waste in the coastal communities, no, but we haven't identified the use to what we call waste. They are new materials or new resources that we can bring life into them, and they can be used for other things and really better the lot of the poor within the local communities in our coastal regions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Snow?
We've jumped around from so many topics, from blue carbon to fisheries, to
it's a huge economy. What can we say?
to food security, to livelihoods. So I'm not too sure where to touch on. So I think in response to your question, yes, we have to look at circular closed economies. In other words, stop producing waste. So anthropogenic waste. Then, yes, we do need to look at turning around some of these consequences and impacts because of climate change. There's a reason that sargassum is becoming more prevalent and changing the system. We also need to understand that that's possibly changing the food system as well. The fisheries, the food availability, the whole ecosystem is being changed. And we may have to look for alternative sources of protein and alternative aspects. So we need to understand, what is this impact? We can say there's more seaweed, it's got this problem, we need to do this, we can solve it by including it in that. But it means there is also knock-on effects in the whole food system, in the whole ecosystem, with the fact that we are now having more seaweed. And as humans, we are very innovative and entrepreneurial, but I think we also need to look a little bit carefully at how sustainable some of our entrepreneurial and economic initiatives are, how equitable they are. In other words, who has agency and access to these new initiatives and innovation. As Prof. Addo said, you know, who's going to benefit? Who's going to, is it going to put food on the table, and where's the food going to come from? So, and then you look at the blue carbon habitats, and protection is not the only thing. Ecosystem restoration was mentioned as a possibility. And mangroves are also nursery grounds for some of the fishes that are necessary for the fish stocks. So I think, again, it takes us right back to, this is a very complex and complicated system, and we need to understand the interconnectivity to the system. We also need to understand the system has changed because of climate change and because of human impact. There is illegal fishing, there is overfishing. Not everybody is environmentally conscious. Not everyone keeps to within the rules around the world. We also need to understand that we work in Africa in regions, so they're connected between different countries. So we can't just have overfishing in one and think it's not impacting on their neighbors, you know, and illegal fishing in your neighbor's waters. You're impacting on the whole regional structure. So I think we need to collectively, as a continent, start thinking how we can manage our systems and our fisheries, our nursery grounds, our industrial economies, and how we can then contextualize, so bring the voice of context, the local economy, the local people from there into these conversations, so that they are not forgotten and that they are benefiting from these decisions that are being made.
Thank you very much. Let's start with our closing remarks. Ms. Daniels, we'll start with you. Then we'll have Rocky, Zaidi, Dr. Snow. If you still want to add more, you're more than welcome, and Professor Ado as well.
Yeah, just to echo, I can't remember who said it, but the people around the table, it's a very diverse group, and I'd like to take this conversation forward. Post this, I think there's so much value we can get together as a collective, because I think sometimes we all operate in our silos, and day to day, the stresses of just getting through the day, you forget that there's people outside your silo that can positively impact what you're doing. And the more, we use this buzzword of co-management, but we co-manage in our silos, and we don't co-manage broader, and it's pulling everybody together and finding some middle ground. Because besides being in the fishing industry, I remember as a child, those were my favorite things to watch, the nature programs linked to the ocean. So yes, the ocean is my business, but I think we have a responsibility for the future generations. Besides the food security, it's clean oceans, it's being able to see whales and dolphins, and for us in South Africa, snook and all these endangered species. I mean, we're sitting with the industry of West Coast rock lobster, on the brink, and we're fighting for it because it's such a thing that's linked to our culture and our communities, and you don't want that to die out. And it's so interlinked. It's so in my heart and my soul linked to the survival of the ocean. And we need to start putting our egos aside and saying, how do we come together to make a bigger difference and move outside of our silos? I think that would be my last remark. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shamira. Rocky?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. I think we've gotten to the point where, things have become so dire and urgent that we really can't do things the way we used to. And it means also not working the way we used to, and, competing with each other and kind of like disagreeing with other people's approaches, because we're just going to end up arguing. But I think we really have to kind of like put everything out there, not care too much about credit and that's what, and really just find the best of what's working everywhere, and really kind of like put more energy and I guess cooperation towards those kinds of answers, because we have no choice at this point.
Thank you very much, Rocky. Thank you for that. Zaidi?
Yes, so my closing remarks. I think one of the things that I would like to focus, which is very close to my heart when I go out at the ocean, fishing is one of the dangerous occupation, whether it's small scale, whether it's now with the impacts of climate change on the fish's job and the workforce. So as an ambassador, I move around to discuss the workforce, making the workforce safe. Safety at sea is fundamental and foremost, and investments are going less and less in these areas. Innovations are out there, but it's not getting to developing states. Now, when we talk to development agencies, especially within the UN blocks or within International Aid Corporation, unfortunately, support for international labor organizations' decent work agenda for small-scale fishers is not there, or the support is not coming the way we need to. So a collective action to support the workforce is heavily needed from all angles of international cooperation. And therefore, I think highlighting and bringing industry players, professors, practitioners, NGOs together to really say, okay, do we agree? Okay, this is, statistics are saying this is the workforce is in such a critical condition. Investments could be placed in there to support that. Again, a lot of it is contextual, but from a global picture, This has been my research over the last 3 years, and I heavily work as a marine operations safety as a sea officer. I think it's something that I personally would like to contribute, and I'm contributing. And I look forward to my listeners. If they would like to know further in this area of research, feel free to connect with me. But thank you. Such a pleasure to be discussing things that we really love, but you also love to have seafood on your plate. So we are trying to do our share here.
100%. Thank you, Zaidi. You know, the way we've been speaking about policies and strategies and interventions, we forget that some of us love sushi and we want those prawns and the sushis and all of that on our plate. So they've got to be healthy. So thank you very much for reminding us that it's the simple things that count. Thank you. Let's have Professor Addo, your parting words, and Dr. Snow. Professor Addo, you can go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much. And let me say that the business as usual approach to the ocean and the coastal environment needs to change. We must embrace inclusiveness. I mean, there should be inclusive approach, and then that is the way we should go. Probably my last word is that we need to appreciate that resilient coastal systems, I want to reiterate on this, resilient coastal systems are key to the realization of a sustainable ocean economy. If we don't have a resilient coastal systems, we cannot achieve a sustainable ocean economy. Let me thank you very much for the invitation. I've enjoyed the discussion and I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much, Professor Addo. We truly are too. Dr. Snow, parting words?
Parting words, I'll be very quick. I see we're getting to the end of our session. I have to echo what Prof. Addo has said. You know, we need to build resilience and resilience within the system. And also, I want to again echo that I think it's excellent we're having conversations, and it's excellent that the conversations are growing. In other words, this is the first time I'm sitting in a room with these people, and I've sat on many panels in the last couple of months. And I think it's good to broaden our connections and to be able to work together, because there's future opportunities to not only work together, but one thing I want to call is I don't only want to be on panels, let's be part of the solution. We need action, because this business as usual, as Prof. Addo said, it's going to continue if we just keep on talking and not actioning sustainability.
100%. Thank you so much. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our panel discussion on the ocean economy. Action-based, action-based, action-based. And hopefully next year when we have summits such as these, we've made progress to those actions. So let me thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the contribution that you're making towards Africa and the globe in your research and in your respective industries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
ukubonga ku-FPNM SETA ngokuza uzosivulela abantwana bethu imiqondo. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi bazosizakala kakhulu because abaningi abazi ukuthi after umatric benze njani, kodwa ke for suka today ngiyacabanga ukuthi bazokwazi ukuthi bazokwenzani, and ne-platforms nikeziwe ngiyazi ukuthi bazosisiza kakhulu since besinike nama-addresses nani sizothintana nabo. Siyabonga kakhulu.
evidence is clear. Organizations with more women in senior positions outperform those with less inclusive C-suites, yet women remain underrepresented in all levels of management. To bridge this gap, the UN Global Compact launched Target Gender Equality, an accelerator program that helps our participating companies set and meet ambitious corporate targets for women's representation and leadership in business. Companies that commit to the accelerator program are not only equipped with the latest data and research, but they also then join a growing network of partners who are working collectively to tackle the barriers to closing the gender gap from the C-suite through to the supply chain and into the communities that these companies serve. Now let's hear from some of the participating companies directly.
It has been 1 year since our participation in Target Gender Equality. The initiative has been helpful to us. We have understood the importance of not just setting overall targets, but interim targets as well. We have seen the number of female employees in management level has increased. We are already working on how to improve facilities for ensuring better, comfortable and safe work environment. We are even conducting monthly meetings discussing the progress of Target Gender Equality. We would highly recommend other companies to join the Target Gender Equality program.
As a UN Global Compact participant, this program allows us to accelerate our practices of the United Nations Women's Empowerment Principles. We benefit from the action planning guides, workshops, and real-world examples provided by the program, which helped us creating a dedicated roadmap for our contribution to 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
One thing we have learned is that regardless of how big or small your company is, or how male-dominated your sector is, you can make a difference.
Join the Target Gender Equality Accelerator today.
Solar PV generators are increasing in number and size across South Africa and the world. They are powered by photons from the sun and produce electricity here on Earth during the day. PV modules are a key component of PV generators because they convert the energy from photons into electrons that deliver electricity to the network we use to power our homes and our workplaces. Solar PV modules must perform reliably for 25 years in the tough South African environment to achieve the expected low cost of electricity from the PV generator. Accelerated stress testing is an effective way to ensure that only reliable PV modules are procured and installed so that actual performance meets expected performance over the lifetime of the PV generator. To support the solar PV industry in South Africa, the CSIR has invested in expertise, skills, and the facility for accelerated stress testing. The facility will support the PV industry during the implementation of the National Integrated Resource Plan, which includes the integration of 8 million kilowatts of PV generators onto the national grid by 2030. The facility is designed to simulate 25 years of real-world PV module degradation in only 3 months. PV modules are subjected to extreme conditions in temperature, humidity, mechanical pressures, and electrical potential according to procedures defined by international standards for accelerated stress testing. The stress tests are designed to provoke the same failures that are known to occur in the field over time when modules are poorly constructed, improperly installed, or poorly maintained. Side-by-side testing of selected modules during the accelerated stress tests provide quantitative data for ranking the reliability of PV modules relative to one another. The data is then used to procure and install only the best modules in terms of safety and performance. The CSIR investment included an outdoor testing facility for real-world performance monitoring and model validation for flat-plate PV modules, including crystalline silicon, thin film, bifacial, shingled and half-cut cell modules. The CSIR became an early adopter investing in the first of 4 PV plants for its Pretoria campus in 2015. The PV facility is used for research on a larger scale, innovation, and self-generation of electricity. The PV module research and testing facility represents but one research interest of the CSIR Energy Centre. Other research groups focus on electricity systems planning and optimization, the just energy transition, developing new materials for chemical energy storage, energy efficiency, and piloting new thermal energy storage systems. The CSIR Energy Centre provides a broad range of scientific research and innovation necessary to support the future energy landscape, one of which will be more complex, interconnected, and decentralized. The integration of accelerated stress testing of PV modules will help ensure the solar PV generators play their part in generating reliable electricity from carbon-free fuel for decades to come. Closing message by Dr. Kitesa Roro: quality is everyone's responsibility.
South Africa is transitioning to a low-carbon economy for a sustainable future. According to the IRP 2019, which details the long-term electricity planning for the country is planning to install 6,000 megawatt of solar PV between 2022 and 2030. The solar photovoltaic modules that are currently in the market should work for the 25 years lifetime.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sustainability Summit 2022. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have just come from a power-packed conversation around developing sustainable smart cities, and we just kick-started the segment of food security, speaking about the ocean economy. Now it's getting real hectic and real deep. We're talking agriculture. And without further ado, let me welcome my esteemed panel of guests. We have Mr. Chris Muyenda, who's the Principal Business Mentor at AAIN. We have Ms. Gabby Malope, who's Director and Principal at Teoteli Agriculture College, South Africa. We also have Nonhlanhla Joy, who is the CEO of Umgibe Farming Organics. She is logging in from Ethiopia, so she should be joining us shortly. We have Sikolise Mgcinga, who's a senior analyst at Sustainable Agriculture Green Cape. We also have Hampi Bapila, who's head of agro-processing and agriculture at the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, which is one of our lead sponsors for the Sustainability Summit. We also have Nomkhulu Kovic, Dr. Nomkhulu Kovic, who's a Director General Representative to Ethiopia, and she will be joining us shortly as well. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to have such a critical discussion in this day and age and in this economy. Apparently, by 2030, if we are not part of the value chain of agriculture, we'll all be starved. So kickstarting the conversation would be you, Mr. Muyenda. Chris, over to you and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this very important meeting with all its various seminars so far that you have started. We have enjoyed them, and they're all very well linked. You know, we have just moved from the ocean economy. We have now come into the real agriculture, real agribusiness on the land. And in order for us to be sustainable, and in this case, actually sustainability can be interchanged with competitiveness. In order for us to be competitive in the future, it is very important, I think, to ensure that we have, number one, appropriate policies for the sector. The policies for the sector in any given country, very crucial for sustainability, for competitiveness into the future. Number two, it is very important that the producers of agricultural products have a clear market. They must be able to see where the market is now, where the market will be in the future. Number three area, very important for sustainability, for competitiveness, is the issue of the technologies, the agricultural technologies that we are employing, be it irrigation, be it water capture, be it any technology within the value chain of agriculture, which is meant to sustain the sector going forward. Technology is very key. I think a key issue, which is important also outside the environment, is finance. What will be the finance for the agricultural sector? What will be the source of finance to maintain this sector, to ensure it is competitive into the future? What are the different sources of finance? So I think those are the four key pillars I would like to expand on as we go on in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muyenda. Actually, you just laid the foundation for our conversation, so truly appreciated. Can we have Gabby?
Good day, everyone. It's so interesting that we're working at the very particular time where we need to also be discussing the power in agriculture right now, because it does really affect our economy at this point, and of course production in many levels. My name is Gabby Malope. I'm the founder and director of Teoteli Agriculture College, and currently sitting as the principal for academics. And it's been in existence for the past 8 years, and I'm accredited with AgriSeta, and we are participating in a rural space, so we are more of a rural agriculture college. This is where we're tapping into indigenous farming, but moreover, we have now adapted indigenous farming to hybrid technology combination to attain the sustainability, of agriculture beyond what we currently know. So I'm quite excited to be here because this is a platform where we're going to explore each other, and actually even an honor to have Mr. Chris here today, so that we can learn from each other.
Thank you, Gabi.
Thank you very Thanks, Mamulupe. Absolutely looking forward to also finding out more of what your agricultural college does and the initiatives you are involved in. Thank you. Xolise?
Thank you so much, Tabi, for this amazing opportunity. I'd like to greet everyone today and also highlight that it is an honor to be part of such an important discussion, really discussing global challenges such as food security. My name is Xolise Mcinga. I work as a senior analyst at Green Cape, particularly focused on the sustainable agriculture sector. So Green Cape is a nonprofit organization which drives the widespread adoption of economically viable green economy solutions. So we basically work at the interface of businesses, investors, government, and academia to help unlock investment as well as job creation opportunities in the green economy space. So part of our mandate as the Sustainable Agriculture team is really looking at creating pathways or the right environment for stakeholder engagements, information dissemination, as well as promotion of investment within the space. And also to ensure that agriculture, sustainable agriculture that is basically at the core of conversations such as this one. Because we do understand that sustainable agriculture is the result, or it will be the future for social upliftment, for poverty alleviation, for increased productivity within the agri-sector and the whole value chain, and as well as economic growth, and therefore yield the important topic that we're talking about today, which is food security.
Thank you very much for that. Key pointers that you mentioned there, particularly around social upliftment, poverty alleviation in the context of food security. So we look forward to engaging further with you on that. Mr. Kampi?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks also for giving us an opportunity to be part of this very important conversation. My name is Hampi Vapela from the IDC. I'm heading the Agro-Processing and Agriculture Strategic Business Unit. IDC, it's one of the probably oldest DFIs in the world. We celebrating 82nd birthday this year in October. And agriculture is also one of the key sectors. Not only because it's important for our economy, but also its ability for creating sustainable jobs. You would have noticed that even during COVID, this is the only sector that maintained growth. Actually, is the one that carried our economy. And as the previous speakers have already mentioned, it's important that we continue to fund and expand. Without funding, we may talk about these things, but also in funding, we have to start finding innovative funding solutions, not only looking at the conventional way of doing things, but also the technology, funding of technology, but also looking at alternative ways of farming, especially intensive methods, urban farming, vertical farming and all that, because we're having challenges of changes in climate change. It's difficult to even predict the rainfall patterns and all that. And as a country, we are a water scarce country, so we need to start thinking about all different alternative methods. But with that, it also means that as financiers, we also have to adapt and start thinking of creating new innovative solutions to address this. Thank you.
100%. Thank you, Dr. You've mentioned a critical aspect there. What are the alternative methods that we can explore to agriculture? I mean, we are now able to grow, vegetables on balconies, for example. I'm going to ask a very basic question, ladies and gentlemen, and it's going to be posed to all of you. But we'll start with you, Chris. Why are people hungry when we have agricultural capabilities across the continent, across the country?
Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. And that is really the perplexing question, which is self-inflicted upon ourselves. People are hungry because the sum total of agricultural policies is not right. Okay, if we have the right policies, and one of the key policies is that we must keep the continent open. Today, we have the so-called African Free Continental Trade Area.
Yeah.
The key commodities we are supposed to put in the trade pipelines in that African Continental Free Trade Area are agricultural commodities.
100%.
Africa is a large continent with various agroecological zones. We can grow everything we want
100%.
Because North Africa is different from Southern Africa, West Africa is different from East Africa, and the center is different. And each one of them has different capabilities to support different agricultural commodities. So our agricultural policies have to be linked on openness to be able to move our commodities around the continent and feed everyone. So a key area for all our leaders to look at is that we have one Africa. It must be open. No one should go hungry because the continent is able to produce everything it needs on itself. So that's the key area around policy. So the issues of import-export bans of what should be looked at. We should move around our agricultural produce on the continent, enjoy what Africans can produce, what our God-given continent has been given to produce. Let it be given around the continent and let stakeholders, no one should go hungry. So that's one key area, and it's very important for all the policymakers to be sensitized to this issue. There are aspects, there are rules that we have to follow when we move around agricultural commodities, because we don't want to be distributing pests and diseases and so on. So there are rules in doing this. We have to work together, okay, to make sure we are able to control the pests and diseases as well, and that those are not hindering agricultural trade. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you very much for that. Gabby, you want to come in there? You are teaching in your college a lot around indigenous farming. Why do you think people are hungry? I mean, you're exposed to these communities that you're trying to teach, but most of them are exposed to poverty. Why are people hungry?
Quite interesting. And sorry, I think being in the ground levels, I have also identified quite a number of contributing factors. Number one being you find a livestock farmer in the Eastern Cape who has so many sheep. That is wealth, according to me, because we classify them under assets. But the challenge they're having is to name the sheep, give them ancestry names. That is now the indigenous part, which is not spoken to us. And it's so difficult for them to take these animals to processing to become, revenue for them and for their survivalists. And then you get another farmer who is actually doing so well, doing so well in livestock farming, but the money is actually transferred to other things. You have somebody who's staying in Joburg who actually is your business or even multiplying it. Then you come to your crop farmers. Our South African landscape has now become so much diluted that every farming activity that our government brings or exposes us to, everyone runs to it. They forget the traditional farming practices, which is just producing firstly for livelihood. And they are hungry not because there are no resources. Remember, South Africa or Africa, I would say Africa as a whole, it's a landscape for natural resources. You look for gold, you find it here. You look for any type of crop. You know, we are the only people who still can take cassava and you know, have the roots and the leaves. So, but we're not seeing that. We also have a challenge of giving away what we currently having for something less. I was actually evaluating how much we are rebuying the product which have been harvested here in South Africa, go to other countries apart from Africa, and coming back to us to actually generate more money. But this is agricultural products which we are now have to sell back to our very own people, and also make them, you know, not sell the crops that we are producing here. I'm still checking which door are they living in, because they end up coming to us as, you know, products processed, and they no longer even carry the same weight. You'll remember when Moringa came in, it was a buzz. Moringa came in, it was a buzz. Everyone stopped farming vegetables, wanted to do Moringa. And then not so long, there was cannabis. Everybody stopped doing spinach, but they want to do cannabis. The challenge again is that we are not ready for the process, because in order for you to start producing cannabis, you must be a very good vegetable farmer, understanding climate and seasons. Then you can be processed to this, you know, high products which are being, you know, brought to us. That is something that I am seeing, and also not to see us and cross-pollination of products. I still want to go to the furthest place to get a product when we can actually produce locally and, you know, omit a whole lot of expenditure channel. So this is something that we are having. We need just a mind shift. That's what we need. But South Africa, and other, you know, continents of Africa, we're carrying so much weight with natural resources. We're the only ones who still enjoy our crops that are not even with you know, hasty chemicals. You've got forest that still produces natural fruits. Every December there's wild fruits which we could be harvesting and working on the way to restore them, and we still have the opportunity to replant some of the products that we're having. I'll make an example. We are currently producing tea from our indigenous trees, which are naturally busted from the soil, and they are not owned by anyone. But we're producing that tea and it's hitting the market. We got it to be in commercial market. So this is some of the things that we have natural resources. The most important thing is to shift the mind and put it together, package it so that it sustains, and we just break away from the systemic poverty that we are in line with. But I think we need mind shift. That's very important.
Maybe you've raised something so critical, and just from what you're saying, something that conjures my thought is we are exactly what we need to get out of poverty. There is no one else, there is nothing else, there is no government or institution that can get us out of hunger, but we can. So what do we have in our hands? And up until we realize what we have in our hands and channel it to the utilization aspect, then we can go for. Thank you very much for saying agency. We've got it. We want to explore more of that. Kolise, why are we hungry?
Wow, it's such a mind-blowing question, and also to think that the answer really lies within us to really identify exactly why we are hungry. I mean, just trying to unpack this topic, obviously I did a bit of research to really understand why are we even talking about food security or food insecurity thereby in Africa when we are so well vested with natural resources. And I'd like to highlight exactly what Gabby was mentioning before, that it's really a mindset thing. It's really a situation where we need to identify how we can move or really capture the primary production side of agricultural production, and therefore shift things towards like the correct processing methodologies, and then really identifying the technologies that are supposed to be linked within all of that processing value chain, and then go as far as packaging our ideas, packaging our products, and making sure that we commercialize. Because a lot of the times, most of our primary production is just left at subsistence level, especially if we're talking about your subsistence farmers, whilst the commercial farmers, on the other hand, are flourishing, and they're the ones who are setting the price, who are setting the standards for commodities. And therefore now it becomes a lot more inaccessible because we don't want to integrate ourselves within this whole value chain and within this whole production system in agriculture. So I do think that I would like to highlight very much about what Gabby was mentioning around mindset. So if we do change that, I do see Africa as a successful story, really. And also one of the things that I also like to highlight that Moyanda mentioned is really around policy and how flawed the whole system is. I think part of the reason is that a lot of the times we develop policies in response to a crisis. It's never a proactive approach to policy making. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You hear people talking about the sugarcane master plan, for an example, and it's in response to a crisis. You hear us talking about the poultry master plan, for an example, and it's always in response to a crisis. It's not setting up the correct policies in place that integrate the whole system from your primary production all the way to the end product, and making sure that we incorporate all of these things before responding to a crisis. I think that is one of the other reasons that is making us hungry.
Sure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the point you made around policy as a response to crisis, not even as a response to development. So thank you very much for that. We'll explore that further. Mr. Mapila, with all the alternative methods that the IDC is investing in, why are people still hungry?
Yeah, thanks for that. I have a few points and I'll expand on all of them. The first thing is, it's not because we don't have sufficient food, we produce enough. It's one is access, and I think Mr. Muyanda touched on that. Access in that all African economies, agriculture, it plays a very significant role in terms of the economy. But the reason why we then resort to protectionist mechanisms is because we also do not have uniformity in terms of regulations. So you would find that South Africa is having its own standards. Another country does not have, others do have. But then now the question is, whose standards are you going to be using? If you an African country, you want to trade with EU, you're not going to deal with individual countries, you're dealing with a bloc. They've sort of harmonized their regulations. But now for us, for the free trade to work, we need to first deal with those. But we could also deal, while we still solving the regulatory environment, we could also look at obviously the issue of preservation. I mean, just most of these produce that the products that we're producing obviously are seasonal, but how do we then make sure that we preserve them? Because especially for those who produce for sustenance, how do they make sure that they can still have the same produce throughout the year? So we need to be maybe helping and investing in preservation methods. But again, going back to issue of access, if I give example of South Africa, like subtropical areas, if you look at, say, Limpopo, that produces most of these fresh produce that you find in our major markets, fresh produce markets. So a typical, a middle class, if I can use that word, in Limpopo, will pay a little bit more than somebody who's in Joburg for veggies, because these veggies will travel from Limpopo to Joburg to be packed and travel for another 300 to 400 kilometers back to Limpopo to be on the shelf in some retail store. So that person will be paying a little bit more for something that is not so fresh. So that's the reality that we're facing. So we need to start looking at different ways of doing things. But the other thing that was also mentioned by one speaker, it's the unique microclimates. South Africa is a country, we have unique microclimates. Now, if you take the continent, we will be having different windows for different produce. So in working together, we can be able to also make sure we alleviate this challenge. Issues of regional integration. If I give example, now, South Africa, we're struggling with the prices of feed, for animal feed, especially the protein component, because of the war that's taking place. You've seen the price of cooking oil, because the protein part, which is oil cake, it's a byproduct of production of cooking oil. So you then look at, say, a country like Zambia as an example. The environment is favorable for soybean production, while South Africa is leading in the region in production of poultry. Why not have a negotiation with Zambia? You produce the soybean, we invest in the crushing of it, we import it to South Africa, so we're not dominating by just product moving one way, one direction. We bring your oil cake to South Africa, we feed to our, we push it through our poultry industry, we then sell you chicken. So it's a win-win. Zambia would have sent South Africa something that is processed, so it's value added. South Africa will also have sent something back to Zambia that is value added. So everyone wins. There is no big brother thing. There is no, then we'll have these issues of border being closed for some of the food products being done away with. So we need to, as countries, look at our comparative advantage. Look at what we're good at and stick to that. Then the other country also does what they're good at, but then we then trade on that basis.
100%. A key point that you've added there is comparative advantage, and I think I love the term "Big Brother," because Africa trades with the rest of the world. It's an egocentric transaction, and it's very unfortunate that with a lot of African countries, we recognize trade only when it's with, exporting to the European market or exporting to the West, but not amongst each other. So going back to you, Mr. Muyunda, how do we, can we then go into the political issues that are affecting access to markets? Because we have a market, but it's not as clear as it should be. Even the African Free Continental Trade Agreement has this renaissance going on. It's a $1.4 billion market or $1 trillion market when they calculate it. What are the political nuances that are affecting access to a clear market?
Yes, so this is really key. We have to have the will at the highest level to ensure that our aspiration to have one continent, one market actually works. Are you still hearing me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, okay.
Yes, indeed.
You disappeared briefly, but I can see you now.
I did.
Yeah. Yes. So we have the aspiration to be able to create one market, the African continental market. But within, for that continental market to work, we have to ensure everybody knows the rules. And somebody, I think, talked about the issue of standards. So the fact that we are one does not mean that we should be selling rubbish to each other. No. We have to sell, number one, safe, nutritious foods around the continent. So it is important that our producers, smallholder farmers, SMEs, traders are capacitated in terms of the standards of the commodities that we are going to trade in. So if it is cassava, okay, cassava, we can use the leaf, we can use the root, we can use the tuber, okay? But when we want to trade it, we have to understand exactly in what form the tuber is required in Tanzania, in what form the tuber is required in Malawi, okay? What should be its content of water? The tuber has a lot of water. What should be the amount of water in there for it to be acceptable, okay? Some of these commodities, if they have too much water, they will go bad after a while. So to cut a long story short, standards, it is very important to capacitate our communities, our people, in terms of the quality standards that are required for all the tradable commodities. We produce so many commodities, okay? We talked earlier about the issue of value addition, agro-processing. So if an agro-processing industry is located in South Africa, because people, in order to eat, do not just require agricultural commodities. Sometimes they require money, they require finance to have access to the commodities grown by others. But if the agricultural commodities are going to be moved to a factory, we have to ensure, one, our people understand the standards required by that factory. Our people have to understand the issues of what is going to happen at the border for the commodity to be able to cross. Because even if we are one continent, we still have 55 member states. So it is very important. I think a key area also, we are talking about agro-processing, but also even technologies for adding value at the farm level so that we can get more from our commodities. The technologies, there are various technologies, simplified technologies that can be used to get more out of our maize, to get more out of our cassava, to add value, so we can produce more products, and the people are able to get not just food, but also money to buy other requirements for developing their farms. Thank you.
100%. Xolisa, I think maybe you can come in here, just with the, as an analyst, and looking at different sustainable agricultural activities that could ensure there's better production and efficacy and so forth. How do we ensure good agricultural practices to ensure sustainability?
Thank you very much, Tabi, for that. Yes, there's quite a lot of R&D that is happening in the space, and I think one of the very important things to highlight is that South Africa is really spending a lot of time really investing in technologies to improve agricultural production. And some of the methods that have been identified, especially for crop production at the moment, is your regenerative agricultural practices. And this includes your conservation agriculture, this includes your organic farming practices, and particularly looking at also the benefits of venturing into these farming technologies. Now we're talking about carbon trading, where we're talking about carbon sequestration. So all these practices that result or improve carbon sequestrations, and then people not only get value for like the crop value, a good produce out of a good farming practices, but then now they also can tap into the carbon trading market, which really looks into like paying farmers for good agricultural practices. So it's one of the things that we have been seeing going on and really improving the uptake of sustainable agricultural practices here in South Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps, Mr. Kambi, you can just extend on that, because Sikolisi touched on technology. What are the types of technology that the IDC has funded, particularly for farmers or the agricultural sector? And then we'll have Gabi come in with some of the aspects there.
Thanks. The intensive agriculture, obviously the issue of land is it's a very it's a problematic issue, but also with maybe thanks to also climate change, it's almost sort of forces us to adopt these technologies. So we see a lot of urban farming where people are able to produce more in confined spaces, but because of controlled environment, they can be able to produce throughout the year. So that's what we've been able to fund, especially also the vertical farming. It's a new thing. Unfortunately, at this stage, you can only produce mostly the leafy type vegetables, because you can't have melons, for example, hanging on those trellises. So, but yeah, we open to that. But not only that, what we also looking at, there is drone technology where if you're having 1,000 hectares, you cannot be able to walk through the fields and checking whether the application of fertilizer has been even and all that. So the use of it may be indirect, that is not directly into agriculture, but the drone technology and all that, where within an hour or so, clear pictures can, high densities, sort of pictures can be taken and can be analyzed quickly to check where the intervention is required on the field. And this is not only for large scale players, it can also be for, we're seeing other, especially intermediaries who contract small scale farmers, using apps where a farmer can go and take a picture, and there is a quick analysis of what sort of nutrients are lacking on the crop, and with that the intervention can be made as soon as possible. But we're seeing, talking about intensive agriculture, if you look at things like berries, the use of the irrigation as well. Where you're having precision farming, water only on demand. You're not just irrigating because every day at 9 o'clock or at 6 o'clock you're supposed to be irrigating, but you're using probes that will then be able to determine the moisture level content around the root system, and water will only go where it's required. And we're going to have to be forced to adopt this if we are to continue to produce going into the future, because of this erratic climatic conditions that we experiencing. And even for small scale farmers, I mean, with advancement in tech must have gone through, they can be able to take advantage and move fast track and move and adopt these new technologies. You look at a country like Holland, with more than 400 people per square kilometer, they don't have land and they are below sea level. But when coming to fresh produce, they feed in Western Europe. Why can't we do that with our unique microclimate? So we still have the advantage where we can still have open field agriculture and still also have augmented with the use of greenhouses and all that.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mapela. Truly insightful, especially with some of the case studies. Like, as you said, with Holland, Africa is larger than, European countries in terms of land and so forth. But once again, it goes back to those nuances around the finance, the technology, and that Chris mentioned earlier on. Gabby, maybe you can come in here. What is the key curriculum or the key principles that you teach in your college? And have you guys had the opportunity to integrate technology as well as part of the agricultural development? Hi, Gabi, are you still with us? Oh, she's not here. Oh my. Okay, didn't see her jump off. Maybe let's go back to Olise. Have you guys worked with any agricultural colleges or with small scale farmers as Green Cape?
Yes, not only just Green Cape, but there's I enjoy watching just how R&D is trying to incorporate, especially your small scale farmers. So that's one of the things that have been happening in the space. And to also add on to what Hampi was talking about around controlled environment agriculture, there's also a lot of interest in your aquaponics at the moment and the whole technology around aquaponics, which is a very nice circular system, very controlled, which also improves not just your crop production now, but also then improves it also provides the protein element of things, because now if you're going to farm both vegetables, for an example, and fish, then now it's a whole combined system, then that's a whole meal day. So it's one of the things that have been really happening in the space. And then what is also interesting to watch is seeing how these agricultural colleges are really trying to set up capacity building courses and really try to disseminate information for especially to people who want to get into the space of agricultural production, and really looking into these new and emerging technologies or advanced ways or different ways of even agricultural production. So we have been also seeing that in the space, particularly targeting your women, unemployed youth in the space. So yes,
100%. Perhaps Chris, you can come in there just to extend from what Olise has said, and also just the aspect of finance. Can we also touch, because it's a very capital dense industry and space, and most of the time people have the space but they don't have the resources. So how can we better support each other and create local communities? Because I must be honest, Pick n Pay can sell whatever it sells, but I don't see the value of Pick n Pay if people have gardens and they are planting different things, or they have farms and they're planting different things. It just needs a communal system to build that regional economy. So maybe just add more comments on that and we'll go to our closing remarks thereafter.
Thank you. So basically, I think the key point is that our food that we produce, it's not just food for us to eat. It is food for us to establish businesses. This is our biggest comparative advantage. And so even with the training colleges, they should teach agriculture, but more they should teach business. I think they should teach what is called nowadays business incubation, focusing on agribusiness and bringing in particular young people. It is a disaster that this continent should be having such very high levels of unemployment when we are sitting with so much agricultural potential. We should be able to develop different types of businesses from the different commodities that can produce different products. Cassava has thousands of products, from starch to all kinds of things. Maize, we can make so many things from maize, from which we can get money to buy other foods that we need. So what is crucial is really to change the mentality in terms of looking at this great agricultural potential. And recently, I think the president of the ADB said we cannot eat potential. What we can eat is the business that we generate from this potential. So it is very important that we are developing sustainable agribusinesses from our agricultural potential. in particular with a big focus on adding value. Each one of our agricultural commodities can produce so many other things. So we should train our young people. I think we should look at the aspect of various agribusiness incubators focusing on modern agribusiness to be able to expand products from the various commodities that we can grow on this continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now entering the closing phase. Unfortunately, so unfortunate, because we can go on. I think this topic alone needs an entire conference, because the value chain in agriculture is huge. It is vast. And I love what you said, Mr. Muyunda, that we cannot leave potential. And we've been relying on potential for so long. We've been hopeful. It's now time for us to engage aggressively with policy decision makers, with institutions, to hold them accountable, to say that, you know, we have the space, but you have the frameworks. How can we come together and work concomitantly to make sure that this marriage is successful? Can we have your closing remarks, Sixolise, and perhaps last sentiments that you want to contribute? And we'll go to Mr. Mapela, and then we'll come back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabby. But I think from what I've gathered from this interesting session is that agricultural sustainability rests on the principle that, of course, we must meet the needs for today without compromising the needs for the generations to come. That is the first thing. But also, we must, in all of this agricultural sustainability, we must integrate environmental health, which is very important. And we must also not shy away from talking about economic profitability and as well as social equity. So we can achieve all of these things by leveraging on public and private sectors, as well as universities and other institutes for like expertise and training capacity to ensure that we are driving the conversation of food security forward, especially in the context of our African country, which is well vested in natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sixolise. That was absolutely profound. Thank you. Mr. Mapela?
Thanks. Indeed, this was a very interesting discussion. I agree that we needed more time to really go deeper into it. But just to Sixolise's point, and I know she spoke earlier about the reactive nature and how we respond to when coming to policy. But I think we need to be intentional in doing that, especially if we are to make this Africa free trade a success. And there are a few examples on the continent where this was done. A country like Cote d'Ivoire, when they received independence, they obtained independence, they decided they were going to be leaders in certain commodities, cocoa being one of them, palm oil being one of them, rubber being one. And to date, they are still leaders in that space, except for palm, which they happen to have shared with the current leader, which is Malaysia. They shared the knowledge, and Malaysia, because of maybe a favorable environment, they are leading. But the sad thing is that the processing, the value add part of it hasn't happened. And that's where we could, as Africans, now start cooperating, maybe South Africa, Nigeria, another country. Sure. We start investing in that country and helping them to start value adding processing instead of sending out only beans to Europe for them to bring them back to us as chocolate. And talking about cooperation, and this was, by the way, master plans. They had master plans. They may not have called them master plans, but they worked. And it shows that 35 years ago, they were also self-sufficient in rice. Unfortunately, that deteriorated, but they resuscitating that. I think for another thing that I just want to leave everyone with is the taking advantage of enterprise development, where we can crowd in the FMCG players as well as retailers, where we can create aggregators who will then procure from the smallholder farmers and be able to leverage on scale and supply to this FMCG for further processing, as well as retailers for fresh produce close by. I won't mention the name of a retailer, but they pride themselves by calling themselves local. This because they support the local supplier. So, and I think that's what we need to start tapping into, and that's all about working together. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Rapel. Absolutely insightful, and the case studies and the case in points that you brought into this panel discussion really gave us a template for us to move forward with as a country and as a nation. So thank you so much for that. And we are coming to IDC. So when we knock, don't close the doors, because you told us about the rubbers and the palm oils. We are coming. Mr. Muanda, last remarks from you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Indeed, we are coming to IDC.
Yes.
I think I think the food import bill that the African continent has, I think is somewhere beyond $30 billion a year of food import, is totally unnecessary.
Sure.
We can deal with this. We can save this foreign exchange. We have enough agricultural potential on this continent to feed ourselves, to add value and feed the outside world. So what we need to do is, one, to further promote entrepreneurship based on agribusiness. We also need, for financial institutions like the IDC, you have done very well so far, you need to do more to create even better, innovative financial packages suitable for African entrepreneurs to unlock the potential, the agribusiness potential, the enterprise potential from the commodities we currently produce. I think we have talked a lot about public-private partnerships. Maybe we should be talking about country-to-country partnerships in terms of what we already have now. One country is producing so many commodities, perhaps the processing potential is in another country. We can work together there to ensure that commodities are moving, we are creating jobs, we are adding value, and we are feeding ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You are incredible pioneers in your industry. My heart is truly touched and overjoyed that at least there are organizations that are experiencing your light, because like Wangari Maathai would say, the land is the very blood that is in our veins. And if we don't invest in the land and the produce of the land, which is a whole dimension that is beyond us, who are we as humanity? So thank you so much for bringing different perspectives into this conversation. And I truly look forward to engaging with you further, particularly where sustainability in the sector is concerned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much.
And all of the best.
Thank you. Great. Fantastic.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
The Cabinet of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa supports Sub-Saharan African cities to tackle the interconnected challenges of climate change and access to sustainable energy. Started in 2015, COMSNET is the African regional chapter of the Global Covenant of Mayors. With more than 9,000 members, the Global Covenant of Mayors is the largest network of cities driving urban climate action. COMSA currently has more than 200 signatory cities in over 35 French, Portuguese, and English countries across the sub-Saharan African region.
L'Afrique doit prendre des mesures urgentes afin de s'adapter aux impacts du changement climatique et, étant donné que le continent connaît une urbanisation rapide, contribuer à l'objectif global de maintenir le réchauffement climatique en dessous d'1,5 degré Celsius. Si cet objectif n'est pas atteint, la menace de sécheresse et d'inondation, le nombre nombre de personnes en situation d'extrême pauvreté et le risque de conflits violents augmenteront considérablement.
A ciência mostra que as cidades africanas são particularmente vulneráveis às alterações climáticas. A população urbana na África deve crescer até 1,26 bilhões em 2050. Por isso, os governos locais precisam fornecer futuro sustentável para todos os cidadãos. Isso pode ser feito por meio de projetos que aumentam a resiliência, que impulsionam desenvolvimento de baixas emissões e que asseguram acesso à energia sustentável, econômica e segura para todos.
COMSA has 3 action pillars. The first one is the development of sustainable energy access and climate action plans. The second one is low carbon urban infrastructure project support, and the third one is strengthening local and regional partnerships.
La Convention des maires en Afrique subsaharienne offre un soutien et un renforcement de capacités sur mesure aux villes africaines pour l'élaboration de leur plan d'action climat. Des experts techniques apportent leur soutien aux acteurs locaux dans les domaines de l'adaptation, l'atténuation et l'accès à l'énergie, ainsi que le reporting et la validation des plans d'action climat.
COMSA works with cities to implement innovative climate and energy projects. Cities have access to experts that can provide guidance to make these projects financially, economically, and technically feasible. There is also potential to help cities with background studies prepare projects.
O Pacto de Autarcas para a África Subsaariana é uma rede de mais de 200 cidades africanas. Aproveita a rede internacional do Pacto Mundial de Autarcas de mais de 9.000 cidades e regiões para facilitar parcerias entre as cidades e regiões por meio de eventos e troca de experiências.
There are a number of tools that the COMSA partners have produced for use by signatory cities. In particular, we have responded to the call from our cities for assistance in accessing climate change finance by producing 2 important publications. One maps climate finance opportunities on the continent, and another showcases 10 case studies of how finance has been mobilized for climate change action in Africa. ICLEI Africa is very grateful to be part of this important initiative, Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa. The European Commission must be applauded for funding an initiative such as this, which places the needs of African stakeholders so centrally to its operations. A particular strength of this initiative has been the partners that have driven it forward.
Eu acho que é uma iniciativa boa, que vai permitir com que trabalhemos de forma organizada e coordenada para os aspectos climáticos e para que tenhamos um planeta melhor e retiremos tudo o que foi cometido como erro no passado e melhoramos o presente e criar condições para o futuro.
Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the most important initiatives that the African cities have taken to address climate change issues. They need to access funds so that plans are translated into investment and that a new behavior, a low carbon development pathway. The most credible lesson that we are learning from the COMSA is the fact that most of the cities are realizing now that despite the fact that they didn't participate so much in global warming, they are equally hit by this catastrophe when it happened, and that they should be part of the solution.
Pour nous, c'est très important d'avoir les maires engagés pour ces politiques-là, mais c'est important de dire aussi que ce n'est pas un frein au développement, mais c'est plutôt l'imagination d'un développement plus harmonieux avec la nature et qui permette de répondre à la fois aux questions sociales, à l'inégalité qui existe dans les territoires, à la possibilité pour l'ensemble de la population de bénéficier d'un développement qui réponde à ses besoins. Nous pensons aussi par exemple aux femmes qui subissent sans doute plus que d'autres populations les effets du changement climatique dans bien des régions d'Afrique et c'est pourquoi nous travaillons aussi avec le réseau des femmes élues africaines pour trouver des solutions adaptées dans les politiques locales. C'est aussi un mouvement qui doit s'approprier la politique africaine pour le développement, la politique africaine pour le climat, en lien avec l'Union africaine, avec les grands organismes internationaux, avec l'Union européenne, qui est le principal financeur du mouvement, et qui doit aussi revoir ses modalités d'application de sa politique de coopération pour servir les villes, pour servir les citoyens, pour servir les Africains.